Okay, everybody, my clock says it's 7 o'clock, so welcome. September 1st in 2020. Something that I find to be amazing given that how this year has been going, but welcome to our meeting. Let's do a roll call, please.
Thank you and good evening. Councilmember Rennie.
Here.
Councilmember Sayak.
Here.
Vice Mayor Spector.
Here.
Mayor and Chair Jensen.
Here. We'll begin with council and manager matters. We've had quite an eventful couple of weeks since our last meeting. So I've asked Ms. Ferbetti to start out by giving us updates on really important things that have been going on, our fire situation and response, our COVID-19 new guidelines, and other events that we have upcoming. So Ms. Ferbetti.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening. Yes, it's been a very eventful 2 weeks, and thankfully the town of Los Gatos escaped the CZU complex fire that is still burning in the Santa Cruz Mountains in San Mateo County. Since the fire began over 2 weeks ago now, town staff has been in communication with county emergency services, our fire chief, as well as others around the progress of the event. Of course, we had a large evacuation warning last week that touched very closely to the town's borders, didn't exactly come into town, but it was very, very close. And we were, of course, watching quite closely. The red flag warning was lifted last week, which was a wonderful relief. And now those evacuation warnings have been rescinded. We continue to be on emergency management calls with County Office of Emergency Services as this event is still ongoing. And we are now very much in fire season, as you all know. So we continue to do our preparedness. We did activate in a virtual way our emergency operations center with key department heads to strategize on our preparations if the fire were to come in our direction. So your town staff were ready if the worst case scenario occurred. Fortunately, it did not. But being fire season, I do want to remind our residents, that especially those who live in the hillsides, to please make sure you have defensible spaces around your homes and around all of your structures. There's instructions on our town website for that information, so you can all be doing what you need to do to continue to prepare for what might be a very long and drawn out fire season. For those of you who are still interested in following the progress of the fires, the town did put up a banner on the front page of our website, www.losgatosca.gov. That if you click on the banner, it will take you to important links so you can watch the progress of that particular incident and find resources if you need them. In addition, PG&E has been very clear to the town that it intends to do public safety shutoffs again this year. So that what that means is that we may find ourselves, even though we're in a shelter-in-place environment, that we may lose electricity. We understand that PG&E has changed its protocol, so it might be that smaller geographic areas are affected, but we just don't know. So again, we want to make sure all residents are prepared and have signed up for Alert SCC to obtain all emergency alerts that might happen. With respect to COVID, as the mayor mentioned, on Friday, the governor came out with a new color-coded system to talk about the different phases of reopening businesses. So the Bay Area is primarily in the purple color, which means we have a long way to go before we get to the yellow color. We are in the process of updating our COVID dedicated webpage for specific information about the governor's order, and in particular, how it relates to the county's public health order, which is really our local guidance for what businesses can open. But we understand that this does give flexibility for certain business types, such as salons. So please check out our website for more information. And then finally, next week on September 8th at 7 p.m., the town is hosting the first in a series of community workshops regarding becoming a more inclusive Los Gatos. This first in the series is focused on police practices and reforms. Judge Ladoris Cordell will be our facilitator. Our police chief and town attorney will be on the panel as resources to answer the public's questions. We're very interested in getting public input, listening to our residents' stories about their experiences here in Los Gatos, and really coming up with some possible reforms or other policy options that the council might consider later on this month or at a future council meeting. So we hope all of you can join us. Again, information about the workshop is on the town's website. It is a Zoom meeting. Everyone is welcome. Please join us. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Ms. Burbetti. Appreciate all the information. Now is the time for council members, individual council members, to report on things that they might have been doing that are of interest to the public as a whole in committee meetings or on boards that they might otherwise appear on other than as a member of the council. So Mr. Rennie, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Mayor. For Silicon Valley Clean Energy Authority, I continued the portfolio management training. There's going to be a total of 5 sessions to understand the energy trading, procurement, and risk management of our portfolio that is needed to better serve on the Risk Oversight Committee. The Risk Oversight Committee also met on 8/13. For VTA, the Congestion Management Programs Committee met, where I'm the chair. Items of interest were, there was an information update on transit signal priority work plan for the Faster Transit Initiative. This plan is to work with the cities, VTA to work with the cities to provide higher levels of signal priority to bus and light rail on VTA's rapid lines. These lines are serving areas, the lines serving our areas near Los Gatos are not the rapid lines, so we don't expect VTA to be asking for signal priority at our lights. We also made slight changes to a staff recommendation for scoring weights for, again, Measure B bike and ped planning grants. Before we did the scoring for bike and ped construction project kinds of grants, and then there's a separate category for planning grants, and we're now in the process of doing scoring for that. For VTA, the Capital Programs Committee met, and of interest for Los Gatos is the recommendation from staff related to the Highway 85 PAB policy advisory, recommendation for how to use the space in the median on 85. We've had members from our council also attending that. Staff seems to have ignored the board's recommendation, instead is recommending that a bus-only lane would be good for private shuttles only, and a VTA service would not be viable as they estimate only 5 boardings per hour. Staff only considered boardings on and off the bus in the corridor, which is basically from 87 north to Mountain View to 101. They believe that we're basically a low density area, and that there wouldn't be the area would not generate that many boardings. In my opinion, they should have looked at it broader and looked at how many vehicles are actually traveling through the area and how we could get people on before, but use this rapid bus only lane to move people through the area. Los Gatos has advocated for not adding more express lanes, but instead having a transit lane. My point of this update is it's sort of things are not going that well. Even Supervisor Chavez and Mayor Liccardo, who are both on the Capital Programs Committee, also made comments that VTA service here didn't make sense because we're a low density area. And again, I think that they're missing the point that we want this to be more of a high-speed backbone that connects into the rest of the system to help move cars through their area. So I've requested a meeting with higher level VTA executives to discuss this more. The alternative, well, the plan of record for this area is actually to turn the current HOV lane into an express lane and add a second express lane. Los Gatos and Saratoga and some other cities sued that I think it was the environmental impact report wasn't done correctly and so forth. And we were trying to stop that idea. My point is, when they get around to saying that this is not worth doing, we'll be back to the two express lanes again, is my concern. The end result from the Capital Programs Committee was a motion made by Liccardo and Chavez again to study whether there was sufficient demand for private shuttles to even bother building a bus-only lane. So all that long-winded is sort of a not so good story there. On 825, I also helped Silicon Valley Bike Coalition deliver bike to work supplies. And today, 9/1, I also attended the Stanford Global Energy Forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rennie. Ms. Sayak?
Thank you, Mayor. Since we last met, the Cities Association, under the umbrella of Cities Association, we have a housing collaborative that is working with ABAG and MTC on their continuous process of Plan Bay Area 2050. And so we've just been providing more feedback on that. And those are plans that will ultimately dictate the planning that we do here within the town level. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Spector?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Since our last meeting, I attended the West Valley Mayor Manager meeting. It was an excellent meeting and it had 3 interesting agenda items. The one that got the most attention was a discussion of how the West Valley can challenge anticipated RHNA numbers, and even more than that, challenge legislators, state legislators that support these kinds of numbers. Thank you.
Thank you. I have nothing to report, so we're going to move on to our agenda. We have 7 items on our consent tonight, followed by verbal communications, followed by some public hearings. I just want to let those of you who are joining us tonight who may not have participated previously in a meeting how we go about our business generally and in the Zoom environment. Consent items are things that we are put on the consent that are generally non-controversial or have been acted on before by the council. For example, the drone ordinance that the council already considered is on consent. These items can be, or thought to be, able to be accepted and adopted in a single motion. That being said, anyone can pull an item from consent, any member of the council or any member of the public. If you want to pull an item from consent, or if you want to speak to the council at all this evening, go to the bottom of your Zoom screen, look for participant. It'll give you an opportunity to raise your hand virtually. When you do that, I will see your little hand up on my screen and try to recognize that and call on you. If an item is pulled from consent, it'll be heard in its normal order. Verbal communications is the time when anyone can address the council on something that is not on tonight's agenda. So we have our consent items, we have a discussion of library fees, an appeal of a planning commission decision, and consideration of a bicycle pedestrian crossing over 17 on tonight. If you'd like to talk about something that I haven't mentioned, verbal communications is the time for you to do that. Raise your hand and you'll get 3 minutes. And please remember that verbal communications, we will not engage with the speaker. We will just listen and take that information because it has not been publicly noticed. So it's your opportunity to talk and alert us to an issue that you want to maybe have on another issue in the future, but not tonight. And I'll discuss further what happens with public hearings when we get there. But for now, let me see if there's any member of the council that wants to pull any item from consent. Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to make comments on item 2, the bike and ped plan, but I'm okay leaving it on consent. Let me know when you'd like me to make comments.
Let's see if anyone else has any questions or comments or wants to pull an item from consent on the council. Okay, seeing none. Anyone that is participating with us tonight want to pull an item from consent, you can do that again by clicking on the button that says raise hand. And what I'm going to do throughout tonight is give it a couple of seconds because sometimes people can't get to the right button. Make sure that we give you the opportunity to speak if you want to. I do not see anyone. So Mr. Rennie, before I ask for a motion on the consent calendar, this is the time for you to make your comments.
Thank you, Mayor. I have two comments related to the bike and ped plan. Well, first of all, thank you, staff, for bringing us an update with an update of priorities. My first comment is our priorities do have some items in the west side of the town on Pollard and Knowles, but I would continue to remind staff and the council to think about doing projects all the way across town. Sometimes we get a little bit focused on the Los Gatos Unified School District and its needs. There's a lot of items in the plan that's not necessarily on the priority on both ends of the town. So I wanted to remind staff to keep in mind to do that. The second item is, I'm gonna leave it on here like this, but I'd like staff to consider B14, which is class 3 bike lanes share the road signs on Keto Road between Pollard and Highway 9. I'd like to recommend staff think about, we'll leave it here for now, but think about an alternative to that. Keto is a very windy, narrow road, and I ride that corridor pretty frequently on my bike. And a better option potentially, please think about, could be to partner with Saratoga and put, maybe like a bike route sign or something like that, and have people use the Sobey Road bypass, which allows you to bypass almost all of the narrow, dangerous road that has no shoulder. Or you could ride part of it and get off on Bicknell and go up more, for example, also. So I would suggest that it might be safer to do like bike route and have people use the bypasses, which are slightly longer, but safer. My concern is as soon as you say share the road, it encourages bikers to get on this road, which really isn't the safest of roads. I as somebody who uses the corridor frequently, almost always take the bypass. So again, I'll leave it on consent as is, but asking staff to consider that for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rennie. Do I have a motion on the consent calendar?
I'll move the consent calendar. Let's see, items is 1 through 6, is it? Items
it's 1 through 7. I saw that council member Sayak had her hand up. So can I convert your hand up to a second on that?
Yes, please.
So we have a motion and a second on the consent calendar, which again is 1 through 7. On this and every motion that we do tonight, I will be taking a roll call vote. So Mr. Rennie?
Yes.
Ms. Sayak?
Yes.
Ms. Spector?
Yes.
And the mayor votes yes, so it passes unanimously. We next come to that portion of the calendar that I spoke about. This is an opportunity for people to identify issues, speak to the council of matters of concern. It is not an interactive meeting. It hasn't been publicly noticed. So you have 3 minutes to tell us what it is that you want us to be aware of. And so I am going to wait for a few seconds while I get people to raise their hands. And I'm seeing 2 right now. So Rob Stump. And when I call on you, simply unmute yourself and start talking. We'll just assume that we can hear you unless we give you a signal that we can't.
Madam Mayor and Town Council members, thank you again for your time this evening. You by now know me. My name is Rob Stump. I'm here representing homeowners in the Civic Center Hillside neighborhood. And as I've said before, we're stewards of somewhere between 200 to 300 acres of hillside above Town Hall all the way to the top of the hill. Tonight, I'm really here to encourage the council to take its focus on wildfire preparation and prevention to a heightened level. Why? The entire Los Gatos hillside just lived through our wake-up call for the fire season on Sunday, August 16 and August 22nd through 24th. On the 16th, we had a dry lightning event with lightning and erratic winds. The storm actually started a fire at the top of Foster Road. Some neighbors concerned about the dry lightning and the potential for wildfire evacuated. They took it upon themselves to get out, which was really a very smart move. If they felt uncomfortable, they should leave, and that's exactly what they did. On August 22nd through the 24th, there was a red flag warning on top of everything else going on with CZU lightning complex fire, more dry lightning and erratic winds. That in combination with that fire over the hill, consuming around 10,000 acres a day and continuing its eastward movement, had many residents on edge. While the town has a roadside fire fuel reduction plan underway, as you've heard me say before, there's so much more to do, and now is the time for the town to commission a wildfire preparation and prevention committee. This committee would be composed of hillside neighborhood leaders, representatives from the town staff, and certainly Santa Clara County Fire Department. The mission of this committee would be to establish a multi-year plan and build on a multi-year plan that already exists, that would take actions that are needed and they're funded to harden our hillsides from wildfire. The plan would be based on the Santa Clara County Community Wildfire Protection Plan, specifically Annex 9, Town of Los Gatos. A committee will be a catalyst for moving good plans forward. And by the way, I volunteer to serve. Fortunately, over the past 10 days, these weather and fire events we've experienced basically left the town of Los Gatos unscathed. But it does serve as a warning that wildfire can strike us in an instant. I encourage the council to act now and establish a committee whose sole purpose is to focus on wildfire protection for the entire town of Los Gatos. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stump. Are there any questions from Mr. Stump? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Catherine, Ms. Spector, do you have a question for Mr. Stump?
I do. I appreciate your concept of a committee to work on things in the future. Do you have any recommendations about what the town could be doing more than it already is within the next 2-3 months?
Yeah, and it's a great question, and I've been thinking about that as well, and I'm sure everyone, because of the CZU lightning complex fire, has as well. You may have seen people trying to get defensible space as the fire was burning. People were clearing their properties, not exactly in the nick of time. And so when we take a look around, what could we do to help avoid that situation should we still have a fire come this season? And it might be things like inspections, where we offer inspections to get out and really take a look at properties and make a change, make a difference now. Encourage people to get out there and do that. It's in some ways got to be a personal ask. So I would really be looking for those things that have immediate return. And certainly there are going to be many lessons learned from this CZU fire that can be shared with us very quickly about immediate actions that can be taken.
Thank you, Mr. Stump. Anyone else have a question? Okay, thank you very much for your continued passion about this issue. Kathleen Willie.
Yes, hello, good evening. My name is Kathleen Willie, and I've lived in Los Gatos with my family for the past 10 years. With the current devastating wildfires, there is no denying that global warming is real, and it's happening now. The increased size of wildfires occurring across California in the last 50 years is attributable to climate change. Since the early 70s, California wildfires have increased in size 8-fold, and the annual burned area has grown by nearly 500%. In fact, the hottest 5 years ever on record have occurred in the past 5 years. To prevent our planet from warming to catastrophic levels, we must limit Earth's emissions in half by 2030. Something that we can all do to help is to minimize the amount of animal products we are consuming every day. A new report from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations says livestock production is one of the major causes of the world's most pressing environmental problems, including global warming, land degradation, air and water pollution, and loss of biodiversity. Animal agriculture is responsible for more emissions than our entire transportation sector combined, and it is the leading cause of deforestation. Animal agriculture produces massive amounts of greenhouse gases, such as methane, nitrous oxide, carbon dioxide, through cattle, through massive manure lagoons, and from the chemicals that are sprayed on the crops that are fed to livestock, since the majority of the crops that are grown on this planet are fed to these animals. And finally, carbon dioxide from the 70 billion animals that we breed, feed, raise, and slaughter every year on this planet. So we have 70 billion animals breathing out carbon dioxide while we are clearing forests, which absorb carbon dioxide, to make room for more livestock. The fires in the Amazon still continue today to make room to produce beef, which is the most destructive food on our planet. In 2018, the most comprehensive study ever on diet and the impacts of climate change was done by Oxford University and was published in the journal Science. It concluded that beef cattle raised on deforested land results in 12 times more greenhouse gases and uses 50 times more land than those grazing rich natural pasture. But the comparison of beef with plant proteins such as peas is stark, with even the lowest impact beef responsible for 6 times more greenhouse gases and 36 times more land required. I'm calling upon the town to include information about the impacts of the food choices in the sustainability section of the general plan. Also, based on the town's adoption of the Green Monday resolution in December, I'm asking for funding so that my group, Plant-Based Advocates of Los Gatos, can develop programs and provide educational material to encourage our wonderful residents towards a more compassionate, healthy, and sustainable future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Willie. Are there any questions for Ms. Willie? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. Jeff Suzuki.
Hello?
Hello, we hear you.
Oh, good evening. Thank you. So there seems to be a lot of talk concerning the personal conduct of police in this town, and that's certainly a deserved and appreciated conversation that we need to make sure that people feel safe and welcome and so on. But there is a fundamental question that doesn't seem to be addressed by officials, which is how should we allocate our resources? It seems that people are afraid to have the fundamental conversation of whether we want to devote almost 40% of our general budget on police. I mean, this time, more than any time, is the time to ask fundamental questions. Do we really need police to perform well checks at this billing rate of around $160, according to the town's report on police staff released in 2015? As the first response to a situation, do we really want to send an armed police officer over to deal with the dog barking? And I'm not being hyperbolic here. That's one of the things that our police do. In the 2014 report, the police department responded to over 3,800 calls that the sheriff in other towns typically wouldn't have responded to, including nonviolent incidents of these sorts. And among Cupertino, Los Altos Hills, Saratoga, Morgan Hill, Campbell, Los Altos, and our own town, Los Gatos, we have the highest number of service hours billed per capita. We're essentially an exception regarding police presence in our greater area. And service hours among our sworn officers are generally expensive. It costs around $160, as I mentioned earlier. And it's no wonder that the department comprises around 40% of our general budget. It's by far our largest budget item. Last year, we spent twice as much on police as we did on the next budget item, parks and public works. From a basic economics perspective, the real question here is opportunity cost. If we had one more dollar to spend, would we rather spend it on the billing rates of sworn officers, or to specialized care workers, social services, or even publicly subsidized renewable energy to reduce our carbon footprint, as Kathleen pointed out earlier, programs that would both improve public safety and the general quality of life? That's the way we should be looking at this. But it seems that a lot of people are wary of having this conversation in public due to the perceived popularity of the police department, which is kind of a shame. We did have this conversation 5 years ago and it kind of died out. At some point, we'll be put to a choice here regardless of what happens. And in the report, our own town produced in 2015 a reduction of 30% in order to have this budget be sustainable. We need to have a reduction in the number of hours of about 30% for our budget to be sustainable in the long run. We should have this conversation seriously and publicly, regardless of how difficult this conversation might be. And finally, I do have one final question, which I ideally would like to have answered here, which is whether there's information that tracks the race of those whom the police department questions, detains, and interacts with I haven't gotten this information from anybody that I've talked to so far. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Suzuki, thank you. As I said, we're not doing interactive, but I think that I'm sure that you will join us for our September 8th conversation, where we'll share answers to that question and other questions that are going to be of interest in our police conversation. The next person I have on verbal communication is emirate Bisbee.
Hi, thank you very much. I, like Jeff, am asking Los Gatos to strongly consider reallocating from the police budget. I'm very happy that we're having community conversations about police reforms and policy options in the coming weeks. That's a great, I guess, start, but more training, reform, or even diversity among police officers won't end police brutality, nor will firing and charging individual officers. Like, reform isn't enough. There needs to be allocation of those resources. Police are tasked with wearing too many hats, with too many responsibilities that they are ill-equipped to perform safely. Please reallocate those resources to alternative emergency response programs. For example, a program that sends unarmed first responders to answer homelessness calls. I was shocked to hear the statistics that Jeff gave. I think that is gross, and that the money would be better served for social services, for mental health, domestic violence and homelessness, affordable housing. Love the ideas about renewable energy being in that conversation. Just like a quick internet search gives all of these options that we could be using our money to spend in a way that is safe for people to live here, all people to live here. And I am looking forward to having that conversation in a week, I guess. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bisbee. Are there any questions? I don't see any. Ali Miano.
Thank you very much. Like Jeff and Emmerich, I'm also with the Los Gatos Anti-Racism Coalition. And as you know, we're very interested in making some changes with respect to education, affordable housing, and what we see as over-policing in the town. And I wanted to focus tonight in my comments on over-policing because just this week I witnessed something in Bachman Park on a morning dog walk that really shocked me. And that was that apparently a man had been maybe sleeping in the creek that night, I don't know. But to help this man out of the creek, there were 4 police cars, a fire truck, 2 social workers, and an ambulance. And he was finally taken in the ambulance. But I wondered why so much personnel for one man who was not resisting in the least. He was completely calm and did whatever he appeared to be being told. And it just seemed like, wow, what a huge waste of resources. That yes, I won't repeat what the others said, other than to add, in addition to what they mentioned as some pertinent needs in the town, I'd like to go back to what Councilmember Rennie said about, public transportation. Wouldn't it be great if we had some real viable public transportation to also help with our concerns regarding the environment? So yes, I will be there on September 8th. I thank you for putting that together. And I hope that there is some really fruitful discussion and action about properly allocating funds in a more effective and in a way that makes sense. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ms. Miano. Are there any questions for the speaker? Yeah, I don't see any. I have a lot of participants up on my screen, and I recognize that some of them are going to be participating in other items we have on tonight, but I do not see any more hands for verbal communication. Again, I'll give it a few seconds to see if somebody else wants to jump in. If not, I'm going to move to our first public hearing. Okay. Okay, I'm going to close verbal communications because I do not see any more hands being raised. And before we get into our public hearings, let me just give you a brief overview of how these are going to work. We will first receive a report from the staff member responsible for presenting the particular item to the council. The council members will then have opportunities to ask preliminary or procedural questions to the staff member or other staff members present who may be knowledgeable about the issue that's coming before us. Once that is completed, then we will look to the participants or speakers that we have that want to talk about each item. Each person who raises their hands gets 3 minutes to speak to us. Please don't go away immediately because as you've seen, we may have questions for you. The procedure is a little bit different with item number 9 because it's an appeal. There are different time limits, and I'll have Mr. Schultz remind us of what those are when we get to that item. But once that 3 minutes is over, that is your opportunity to speak and you won't be called on again. Again, the rules are different in the appeal. But as for the other items, you get the one opportunity. And then once that is done and everyone has spoken who wishes to speak, I will close the public portion of the hearing. The council will then have another opportunity to ask questions of staff. And then we will debate and bring a motion or have discussion on the motion before we make a decision. So that's how we'll proceed tonight. And with that, we'll then go to item number 8, which is a consideration of a resolution to approve changes to the town's comprehensive fee schedule relating to library fines. And Ms. Rivetti, I'm going to assume that that's Mr. Baker giving us the report.
That's correct. Thank you.
Mr. Baker.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. An amendment to the town's comprehensive fee schedule is before you tonight. This change was originally intended to be part of a wider update to the comprehensive fee schedule. However, due to the economic impacts of COVID, discussion of wider changes to the fee schedule will take place at a later date. This amendment to the existing document is brought to your attention tonight as it would have an immediate benefit to library operations. Please note that the entire comprehensive fee schedule is included in the attachment, but the only change to that document would be on page 26 of that attachment and is noted in red line. Specifically, this would be the elimination of overdue fines for library materials, which is a revenue line that has significantly dropped to the point where it costs us more in staff time to administer it now than it returns in revenue. We would like to adopt a model now popular with library jurisdictions across the state that focuses on recovering fees for items that are lost or damaged rather than holding records open to accrue overdue fines. This is a more customer-focused approach that does not penalize anyone for taking reasonable additional time with an item so long as the items are returned. And if not, we bill accordingly as a lost item with the appropriate item replacement fees. The FY 2021 budget was approved with expenditures in library that already accounted for a deletion of this revenue line item, so we don't have to go back on that one. And to conclude, staff recommends adopting a resolution approving a change to the town's comprehensive fee schedule, amending library fines and charges. And I'll take questions if you have them.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Are there any questions from the council for Mr. Baker? Okay, I don't see any. So I'm going to look to see if there's anybody from the public and our participants who wants to talk about this particular item. I don't see any. So I'm going to close the public portion of the hearing and now look to council for questions, discussion, and or a motion. Ms. Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to go ahead with the motion and move to adopt a resolution approving a change to the town's comprehensive fee schedule, amending library fines and charges.
Thank you. Is there a second? That's seconded by Councilwoman Seok. Any comments or questions on the motion before I call the question? Okay, seeing none. Vice Mayor?
Yes.
Councilwoman Seok?
Yes.
Councilman Rennie?
Yes.
And the mayor votes yes, it passes unanimously. Which brings us to item number 9, which is an appeal of a planning commission decision with respect to a single family residence located at 146 Robin Way. As promised, I just want to, before we start, Mr. Schultz, can you please just give a very brief overview of the time limitations and how we're going to do this public hearing so that people understand before we get into it?
Yes, good evening. The appellant will have 5 minutes, and then the applicant will have 5 minutes, then the general public will have 3 minutes, then the applicant gets 3 minutes, and the appellant finishes up with 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. And who will be giving us Mr. Mora, will you be doing the report?
Yes.
That is correct. Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Before you tonight is an appeal of a Planning Commission decision approving a request for construction of a new single-family residence. The project is in compliance with the zoning regulations and the residential design guidelines. On July 22nd, the Planning Commission denied the appeal Development Review Committee decision and approved the project with modified conditions for side yard screening to address privacy concerns. The Planning Commission decision was appealed to Town Council on August 3rd. The appellant has referenced the project design in their appeal as discussed and detailed in your staff report. Staff recommends the council uphold the decision of the Planning Commission by denying the appeal and approving the application with the required findings and considerations in attachment 5. There is an addendum and desk item for this matter. This concludes staff's report, and we are available to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the council for Mr. Mora? Okay, I have a question, then I have some procedural questions. I think they're for Mr. Schultz. So Mr. Mora, when this project went to the Development Review Committee, I believe the finding was that it met all of the objective standards, regulations, ordinances, policies of the town. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And it hasn't changed, so that's still true at the consideration at the Planning Commission level?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Schultz, I think you're the one to answer this. I think this may be the first appeal that we're doing under our newly adopted appellate ordinance, I think. Or a second, okay.
Yeah.
First question, and I apologize. So if I were trying a case and I lost at the trial level and I wanted to appeal, if I went to the appellate court, I could not raise any issues that weren't raised below. So given that at the Planning Commission, the DRC, the appeal was specifically for screening. At the Planning Commission, the issue was, please put screening in the conditions. Design was never an issue. It wasn't raised as an issue. There were some comments, oblique comments by some of the commissioners. Does our new ordinance allow issues that weren't raised below to be raised here?
It does. Our code only deals with whether a person is an interested party, and an interested party needs to live within 1,000 feet of the project. If you may recall, we did discuss that in the policy committee of whether they need to be aggrieved or whether they need to exhaust their remedies at the lower level, and we did not put that requirement in. Some codes in other jurisdictions do have that requirement, but we do not have that requirement that it has to be raised at the lower level.
Okay, so you answered my question in sort of with respect to standing, but I was more directing it toward issue. So my second question on issue is, because our new ordinance limits the opportunity to appeal requires the appellant to meet the burden of proving that there was error or abuse of discretion at the Planning Commission. If the issue raised on appeal was not addressed at the Planning Commission, i.e. design here, how or does the council address a new issue that did not come up at the Planning Commission that is raised for the first time on appeal?
So you're correct, and it says that the appellant bears the burden of proof that there was an error and abuse of discretion. How does he prove there was an error and abuse of discretion if in fact it was never raised at the Planning Commission, I think is what you're asking.
Yes.
And in the last sentence, I think would deal with this. It says, if the basis for granting the appeal is in whole or part information not presented or considered by the Planning Commission, the matter shall be returned to the Planning Commission for review. So it would have
unless the appeal is denied.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I understood what our process was and what the rules were that were surrounding it. With that, any other members of the council, Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Question, I don't know who the question is for. I went online because I wanted to see the DRC's report on this item, and I couldn't locate a report. So I will just ask whoever on staff, the report that was provided to the Planning Commission and also the report that was provided to us, to the council, has various items of information. One of them being a discussion from the town architect. So my question is, can somebody, was that information from the town architect provided to DRC? Can somebody summarize for me what the report that went to DRC looked like? Would be helpful, and thank you.
The report for the architecture was given to the applicant after received by staff. It gets forwarded. There were recommendations as to what the architect was asking, and the applicant then is asked to comment and or address those comments as best as they can, or provide justification as to why they decide to make those changes or not. That report then is reviewed by staff and then forwarded to the DRC to take into consideration when making a decision.
Any other questions? Or does that answer your question, Ms. Spector?
No and no. I have no further questions.
Okay. Any other questions for the council? Okay, seeing none, as Mr. Schultz explained, we have a different process for this hearing. So we will start with the appellant. That is Mr. Zaki. Am I saying that right? Probably not. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So good evening, Mayor Jensen, Vice Mayor Spector, council members, Ms. Sayak, Mr. Rennie, Ms. Pravetti, Mr. Schultz. My wife and I, my name is Jim Zaki. My wife and I, Laura Lee, reside at 140 Robin Way. We are next door at the south elevation of the proposed project of 146 Robin Way. My goal this evening is to prompt a more thorough, balanced, and appropriate review of the proposed construction project and to encourage a formal assessment of recent town review process. There are substantial design, scale, privacy, misrepresentation, and approval process concerns. I address this more specifically in my letter that I submitted today. Before I outline my concerns, I would like to share a positive observation from our last town review meeting. My wife and I appreciated the leadership and professional approach the Planning Commission provided in review of our appeal on July 22nd regarding privacy concerns, which they helped us get what we needed. My appeal this evening is prompted by, and I believe this was because the Planning Commission had a, and I'm not a legal person, but a de novo hearing. So my appeal this evening is prompted by formal comments by the commissioners, Ms. Birch, Ms. Madame, Mr. Hudas, and Vice Chair Ms. Jana, relating to their awareness of building and design concerns regarding roofing materials, the scope and scale of the proposed project, and other issues not addressed during the DRC process. Representations regarding initial neighborhood approval and support were not handled in good faith. There was not neighborhood consensus as reflected in section 15, and I'm happy to address that directly. During the 22 July Planning Commission meeting, commissioners put forth substantive questions regarding the design proposal. There are clear indication that the proposed scale, architecture, and materials are not in harmony with town guidelines within our Stony Brook neighborhood. In addition, as stated, there are serious concerns regarding the previous review by the DRC. I should note, each commissioner confirmed they had visited our Stony Brook neighborhood to view the project and site and surrounding homes. In contrast, I was not made aware of any visit made by the DRC. The project architect, Mr. Colsat, response to to Commissioner Huda's questions regarding how the project has been modified, to formally address the town architect's 7 points of concern surrounding the initial design remains troubling. Please reference page 25 of the Planning Commission meeting minutes. I believe Mr. Colsott provided justification for certain elements relative to his design and not in the interest concerning the Stony Brook neighborhood. Our appearance at the Planning Commission hearing affirmed our belief in due process. We were, however, left with deep concerns regarding the thoroughness and outcomes from the DRC process and the initial approval of this design. Thus, I filed this appeal. The outcomes of this approval process are much more important than this single construction project. This is about my home, about the Stony Brook neighborhood I cherish. Throughout my 20 years in this neighborhood, there have been many construction and major remodeling projects, including our home. There has never been a project that has posed this significant of a risk to our neighborhood standards. My hope is that a design in alignment with the character of our neighborhood that is attractive to the applicant can develop. My request is a thorough review of the town architect's concerns and suggested modifications relative to the proposed project. Please reference Appendix 1 in my letter to the town today for additional documentation highlighting elements cited by Mr. Cannon, the consulting architect, in Exhibit 7 that I do not believe were addressed by Mr. Colsott. In addition, I would value a formal reassessment of the fit of this design with the residential guidelines and to Mr. Cannon's detailed review of the overall aesthetic. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak this evening. So thank you very much. And I really appreciate your time and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Sorry for mispronouncing your name. I have 2 questions. I'll start with Councilman Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Zaki, I don't know if I have it right either.
That's right. That's right, Mr. Rennie.
So your first appeal, I read it in the material of the DRC. The appeal talks about a privacy issue.
Yes.
And I know there was some changes by the time it got to the Planning Commission or by the time Planning Commission finished. Did they address your concerns about privacy?
That was addressed by the Planning Commission, yes. There was, to be more specific, there were concerns that I expressed. The DRC included that concern in the documents and made it part of the plan. However, I was extremely concerned that it wasn't specifically addressed to what it would be other than an 8-foot fence. You know, the suggestion was to meet with our neighbors, which we did. We met with their landscape architect and their architect, Mr. Colsott. We invited everybody to our home, including the DeCourtys, to review the impact and what's happening so they could visualize what we were requesting. Unfortunately, the DeCourtys declined to come. We agreed in concept to what was going to be required for the screening. The proposal that we received from, and I should also state that there's been some challenging elements with respect to clearance and concise communication. When we went to the meeting with their landscape architect, and I quote, she said, "I don't even know why I'm here." So I took it upon myself to explain to her why she was there, because of what the DRC had included in the plan. But I had to do that. So anyway, the bottom line is we agreed in concept of what was going to be required with the architect, with the landscape architect, and ourselves. And I received a proposal from our neighbors, the DeCourtys, that would have taken, and again, when I received the proposal, I hired a nursery consultant who grows plants for a living. I had to pay for a consultant to come over and say, this is what the proposal is. Will this achieve what we agreed to in concept? And he said, that will take 10 years to get to the point where you will have the proper screening. So that's when I made my appeal. And I said, we've agreed in concept, but the proposal is insignificant. And the Planning Commission asked questions. I addressed my concerns. I made observations, I addressed my concerns, and I provided a suggested solution. And the planning commissioners adopted that, rejected my appeal, and put it in the plan. So that's done. And that's a long answer to your question, Mr. Rainey, but so that's done from my perspective.
So the second part of the question really then is, your first appeal was just worried about screening, and now you've done a second appeal,
yes,
worried about architecture.
Yes.
Why did you not cover both appeals?
And it's in my communication. I was not aware that I could appeal the DRC's decision on the architecture. When the planning commissioners started expressing concern due to the de novo structure of the hearing, everything they were asking, and you can go into the documentation of my concerns, and quite candidly, there are other neighbors that have expressed concerns as well. I'm the only one that appealed. However, there still are concerned neighbors. I became aware of the fact that there are concerns about the architecture. Our planning commissioners expressed concerns about them. So I apologize. I was not aware that I could appeal the architecture at that time based on the DRC decision. I am now aware, I became aware that I thought I could because of the de novo level of de novo structure of the hearing. So I'm just reassessing and re-communicating all the concerns that I had previously communicated in the past. And then additionally, if you look at the appendix that I attached to my letter to the town council this morning, there are like, I don't know, 8 or 9 issues that or concerns and suggestions that Mr. Cannon made that are on the record that were either not addressed to the degree that I think addresses the concern or completely ignored. And I'm happy to go over those if you would like. But, again, I had to go through a 108-page document. We're all busy. We all have COVID stuff going on, but I'm so passionate about this because I just want the right thing to happen. And I just want town process to be what it should be. And I was so impressed by the commissioners and how they address this thing. And unfortunately, I was less than impressed with how the DRC approached this. And given all the concerns, I'm just really concerned about the process. So that's why I'm doing this. This was not an insignificant endeavor for me financially either. So this is not frivolous. This is important. This is very important to me. And
thank you, Mr. Zaki. Mr. Rennie, has your questions been answered?
Yes, that's it for now. He gets to come back for a rebuttal after the applicant, correct? I may have questions at that time.
That's correct. Ms. Spector, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. For the speaker, a couple of questions because you're a person who has been to each of these hearings. So when you were at the DRC, was there a discussion of the architectural style? Was there a presentation by staff on the architectural style? Or did you just discuss the landscaping?
I'm sorry, Ms. Spector, is that question for me?
Yes.
At the DRC, we did not discuss landscaping.
Did you discuss architectural style?
Yes, ma'am.
And when you were at the DRC, did you express your opinions with regard to the architectural style? Did you express your opinions with regard to landscaping?
Yes, ma'am, I did. It's all in my letters. It's all in all the documentation.
Understood.
Okay.
So excuse me for a second, Vice Mayor. Mr. Zaki, we can hear the person on the phone with you. So it's a little bit distracting.
I apologize.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you.
Up road.
Okay, thanks.
I'll request.
Okay.
I won't speak anymore.
I'll request silence. Thank you. Sorry. Apologies.
Thanks. It's just a little hard to concentrate when hearing the whispering. Like, what?
My fault.
Okay, sorry.
My fault.
Please go ahead, Mr. Zaki. Sorry for the interruption.
So the question is, you're telling me that architecture and landscaping was discussed at the DRC, correct?
The initial concern was architecture. When we met with the architect,
I'm going to jump in right now because I want to try and get this more focused.
Okay.
Landscaping and architecture was discussed at the DRC, correct?
Yes, ma'am. There were multiple DRC meetings because the DRC instructed the architect to meet with the neighborhood to try to address issues. When I went into the backyard of the DeCourtys and then I viewed the landscape plan, I became aware of privacy issues. So that was subsequent to my initial concerns about the architecture, the scope and scale of the project, et cetera. It was a subsequent element that I added.
Why didn't you, when you appealed from the DRC to the Planning Commission, why did you limit your appeal to landscaping? Why didn't you also appeal the architecture?
Yeah, and yes, Ms. Spector, so as I explained before, I've never been through this process before. I made an assumption that the DRC decision relative to the architecture was not something that I can appeal. When I attended my appeal for the landscaping, and because of the de novo structure of the Planning Commission, when they expressed concerns, when they asked me if I still had concerns, and this should all be documented, about the architecture, scope and scale of the project, I said, yes, I do. I do not know how, from a process perspective, if I misstepped, I apologize and I have to live with any error that I made. However, my position with respect to the architecture has never changed.
All right, thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Other questions for Mr. Zaki? Ms. Sayak.
Yes, just one question, Mr. Zaki. So I appreciate the answers you've provided, and your concerns are clearly elaborated in your written documentation as well as tonight. So my one question, as our town attorney has said, you as the appellant have the burden to prove that there was an error or abuse of discretion by the Planning Commission. And so I did watch the hearing. Yes, there was discussion, but ultimately they did make a decision to deny the appeal with the landscaping conditions that are included. And so can you explain to me in one or two sentences how they erred or abused their discretion?
I believe they expressed concerns that aligned with mine. That's why I filed this subsequent appeal. I believe they asked questions that aligned with mine. And then when I went into the document, the 108-page document, 102-page document, and I read and I took the time to read the concerns expressed by Mr. Cannon, the town consultant. There are 8 in my letter. There are 8 items that Mr. Colsott did not address or completely ignored, and I'm happy to go through those if you would like. But if this is about process and me making an error relative to the process, then I have to acknowledge that. But I'm just being completely candid about the situation and why I did what I did. And there's no ill intent. It's not personal. It's more about, and again, I haven't been through this. It's about town process. I mean, I have other concerns. I mean, anyway, you're not asking me about that, so I won't go into it because I've expressed it previously.
Okay.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Ms. Sayak?
It does, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Zaki. Now we're going to call on the appellant, and the appellant gets 5 minutes plus any questions. And the appellant, I don't know who is going to be speaking for you, but if you have a team, your team gets the entire 5 minutes, not each member of the team. So who is going to be speaking to us on behalf of the appellant? Is it Deborah Johnson or Layla Barrett? Who is it? Who's going to
Leila.
talk?
Yes, hi.
Leila Baranian, okay.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. This is Leila Baranian, along with my husband, Merdad Dekordi, the owners of the property under review. Thank you, Madam Mayor and the Town Council for the opportunity to talk about our project. We believe that an approval was rightfully granted and request of you to please deny the appeal. In developing our project, we have been extremely considerate of our neighborhood and communicative with our neighbors. We know that many of our neighbors, in fact, 18 families in the 32 house neighborhood plus 4 tenants, have no concern or welcome the fresh look of the design as an upgrade to Robin Way and the Stony Brook neighborhood. The project has been compliant with all applicable codes, has been approved by the DRC and later again by the Planning Commission. In the face of dispute, it seems important to note that we have consistently taken the high road, been responsive, and shown the willingness to compromise and incur the associated costs. Continuing with additional public hearings and further delays when nothing is illegal or out of code, when the project is approved, when majority of neighborhood is unconcerned or indeed supportive of the project, appear to be less than fair to us and our children. Please help us to commence with our home project by denying this appeal. Now, please allow me to pass on the podium for the remaining 3.5 minutes to our architect and project applicant, Mr. Gary Colsand. Gary, please.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the Town Council. Thank you, Leila. We have a slideshow that should be put up, shared on the screen. If we could get that. Thank you.
We have it, thank you.
Great. So I thought it'd be helpful to just do a quick review of the process that we did with the architecture. Since this has come up, we wanted to graphically illustrate what we initially submitted and were reviewed by Larry Cannon, what we did to address those concerns, and as well as some other things. So if you could hit the next slide. These are the concerns, how we addressed Mr. Cannon's concerns. We essentially lowered the parapet sections of the roof down. We reduced the amount of wood siding that we had. We have the stained cedar siding. We had it on the left. And we also reduced the height of these parapets. And we changed the garage door, among a few other things. So if you go to the next slide, please. And we went to the DRC. The first meeting, we got continued and asked to go back and work on some adjustments to the home that might be more palatable to the neighbors. And we did some pretty drastic changes, which are also shown in our architectural set. If you look at the elevations and cross sections, we show how much of this overall roof that we reduced. We actually took 14 inches off the overall ridge line. We went from 10-foot plates to 9-foot plates. You'll notice that there's a hip roof over that stone section, which is a bedroom pop out. We lowered the parapet once more. We lowered the front door to be more in keeping with the neighborhood, as well as changed the whole color palette to be more warm and welcoming and to blend in more in an earth tone manner. Next slide, please. This, you can see the 3 stages of the home. The one on the bottom is the one that was eventually approved by the DRC and then reapproved by, if that's the right term, by Planning Commission. Next slide, please. Thank you. Just one point about metal roofs. They're becoming more and more popular around town for many good reasons. They're a very sustainable roof. They're very fireproof. They're great for solar panels. And we went with a dark brown roof, which really is going to blend in much like a regular shingle roof would do. Next slide, please. This is a cross section that shows the relationship between our property and the Zacky's property. You can see that they're elevated 30 to 36 inches above us. We show that there's a 8-foot fence that was recently added as a condition. We illustrate some screening. We're not sure where the privacy concerns are, but we have actually shown the screening. And if you go to the next slide, I want to show you a case study that Mr. David Fox, a very reputable landscape architect, had just completed 18 months ago. These pictures were taken just this month, and this is at 201 University. You can see the before and after. These plants have been in the ground for 18 months. And the bottom right one is a 6-foot fence, and those plants are 13 feet tall. So I'm very confident the plants that we're providing are going to fit. Next slide, please. I'll wrap it up. So this is a streetscape. You can see that how harmonious the roofs are with the hip roofs. We've taken we don't have any gables on either end. We've really worked to fit this house in the neighborhood. And again, this picture is shown without any front landscaping, trees, etc. So we can clearly show the structure. And we have plenty of support by the neighbors as shown as the exhibits that we have submitted to town. Thank you for your listening to me, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Colsat. Council, questions for Mr. Colsat and or Ms. DeCourty? Anything? I don't see Mr. Rennie on my screen because I've still got the, there you go. Anything from Mr. Rennie? I couldn't see you. Yes, question?
Yeah, thank you. So this may be partially a question for staff also, but the report we got is a little bit confusing. What I see in here is the architect's report with, on slide 4 of, maybe Mr. Andrews, you could put back up slide 4 of the applicant. And I probably will want to ask Mr. Zaki about that slide also. But the one on the bottom here where it says second revision, so I don't see that picture in our council report anywhere. I only see the one that's called initial submittal. So I want to be sure that this one down here, it says approved June 9th by DRC and July 22nd by PC. Is this correct? This is what was discussed at the Planning Commission? Because even in the report that's included in our report, includes the Planning Commission report, I don't see that picture anywhere. I want to make sure that that's the one that we're talking about.
I could answer that unless staff wants to.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. The plan set that is also part of this package on page 304 is where the plans begin. And I don't know if the clerk can pull up that file. It's in the packet.
So my question really is, I want to make sure this is the one that the Planning Commission discussed and understood was what was before them. And I want to make sure that that's what, if we, the council, say deny the appeal, don't make any changes, that's what we would be getting.
That is very correct, Mr. Rennie. This picture was shown on our cover sheet as a primary rendering. It's also the final slide that I showed is also part of the package, which we added these two drawings. We added that one with and without trees and landscaping. And that's in our updated package that after we worked with the neighbors and through the first DRC meeting, for our second DRC, we added extra exhibits, and this is one of them. We actually took the time to model each of these homes in 3 dimensions, and they're very accurate. And this is a great depiction. It's taking our streetscapes to a new level. And not that I really want to do this in every project. So hopefully that doesn't get implemented as a condition moving forward. But I think sometimes it's definitely something that's valid. And in this case, we decided just to go ahead really try to prove our point that the architecture really does blend.
So if I could just sort of follow on from there. So what I can clearly see from the initial to what you said was approved, how you address. So in Mr. Cannon's, the architecture firm's report, he has 1, 2, and 3 in the front, which is the wall, which you've now, the stone is no longer a wall, it fits under the eaves. And 2 was the colored wood. You've reduced the size of that somewhat. And the 3rd was all of the windows on the garage, and you've addressed that. Then if I go to the next page of the consulting architect or whatever our term for him is, he has a bunch of items in the back of the house, but we don't see a picture for the back of the house. Did you address the back of the house architecture items also?
Yes, we did. And that's in my letter that we wrote. We worked with staff. When we got Larry Cannon's report, Mr. Mora called me into the office, and we met with Mrs. Arnowitz as well. And we talked about what we could do. Then went back to my office. We made some changes, and then we presented them once again in person. This is pre-COVID. And we also wrote a letter to address it. So the items in the back were very minor, and we didn't feel that they were warranted a lot of time tonight, or even at the Planning Commission. It was more about simplifying the back a little bit. And the town has policies, guidelines that when you change materials, you should also change the plane. And so we created corners. We bumped out and bumped in a little bit just to articulate the difference of materials.
Yeah, I do recall that in your letter. Thank you. Another question. So initially there was a lot of concern from neighbors on this street, and describe for me where in your a process of changing from the initial to the first change to the second change. I've seen a whole bunch of emails now to Layla and Merdad saying that the neighbors are now in favor. When did those letters come? Is that, or sort of, was it the initial one that they were all against, and then this third one, the one that says it was approved by DRC, they were then okay with that application? Is that when those letters came, or did those letters come after the Planning Commission review, or does it, and maybe it doesn't matter?
Well, I'll try to answer this for Layla and Merdad because I've got the microphone anyway. Initially, before we went even to the DRC, Layla and Merdad met with all the neighbors. They know everybody. It's a very close community here. And we gave them plans to take and share, and they had very success getting people live. They left notes. I think they left, hey, we want to talk to you about our house. And so they did the all of Robin Way, or as much as they could. And they tried to document those discussions, and we submitted a log with any comments. Most of them were maybe not specific, but hey, this looks great, or we support you, or we have no comment. There were very few critical comments in those initial discussions that were presented by the DeCourtys to the town in our log and neighborhood discussions. Once the story polls went up, things changed. Okay, then the neighbors saw something that they didn't really foresee when looking at the plans. And of course, you guys know all about this. That's one reason why we do story polls. And so then the mood changed. And then when we went to, we were supposed to be at DRC in March, but then we had a little hiatus. And so when we finally got to DRC in the end of May, the story polls have been up for several months, and neighbors had written letters in opposition to the massing, the architecture, things like that. They could see more, they could go online and see the plans that we had. So that happened. There was also support from neighbors. And we, what we did, since we had town support, we went to DRC without really soliciting more support or re-soliciting the support. So when we went to, after the planning commission approval was appealed, then the DeCourtys actually went back again and showed them, this is what we're doing. This is the latest thing. They showed the neighbors our new elevations, the plans, and they really made a concerted effort to show that there was comments that said 50% of the neighborhood was absolutely against this. Well, maybe 50% is, but maybe we have 50% that's for it. I want to say that this probably the strongest letter that we got was from the next door neighbor to the north, Lauren Hill, who's a licensed architect practicing in California. He grew up on this street, and it made me proud that he really liked it, and he actually liked the version before we changed it. So he's completely supportive of this. He's the one other neighborhood is the most impacted, from privacy and massing and shadows and all that other kind of stuff. And he wrote us a very strong letter of recommendation. Now, these are still just all neighbors, whether he's a professional or not. We have gone through the town process, and you know how rigid this process is. And I can tell you, this has been a tough one. We really were put through the ringer on this one.
So these opposition was before you got to the third version, correct?
Correct.
And then when you got to the third version, how much opposition is there now? The email from Layla seemed to show that she's collected, either they're for it or they're neutral for everybody except across the street and Mr. Zaki.
We do have a neighborhood map that's flagged, and you can see who they spoke to, who's supportive, who's neutral, who's against. And Layla can speak on that if she wants to, if Layla has a mic.
Well, Mr. Colesat, let me ask you, is that flagged diagram, if you will, something that it's part of your presentation that you could share? It may answer Mr. Rainey's question and save some time and effort.
I would love to be able to share all this stuff, but your protocol does not allow me to access this, but it's in the packet.
And you have, but okay, maybe you can tell us, refer the council members to where they can find it. Ms. Pravetti?
It's the very last page of the staff report that was distributed to you. And if you'd like, the clerk might be able to pull that up.
Last page of our council report, or last page of everything we got?
Last
page of everything we got. Okay, members of the council, it is the back of an email, the very last. You flip go to the end, very last thing. So Ms. DeCourty, do you want to add to this map at all? I think that was the question from Mr. Rennie.
Well, I think what you have after that, we received 2 more responses. So in very clear response, we approached the neighbors on 20th and 21st of August, so about 10 days ago, after the DRC, because Meredith and I wanted to understand, indeed, if there is a major opposition in the neighborhood, because we don't want to break grounds on negative vibes. So we thought, okay, let's just figure it out for ourselves. And we approached everybody except for the appellant and the other neighbor who had come to their support before, not sure where they stand right now. And also we didn't approach one more neighbor who doesn't have an email address and who has been in and out of the hospital. Otherwise, we approached everybody, including tenants and homeowners. Since we submitted that, we received 1 more approve or support from 130 Robin Way, and one more not taking any stance from 136 on Robin Way. So in total, we had 18 no concern or support. We had 4 no comment. They said we are not going to comment, and the rest have not responded. We don't know if they oppose. They have not responded.
Okay, Mr. Rennie, did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. That's all the questions for me, Mayor.
Any other questions, Ms. Spector?
Thank you. I thought when I first read the staff report and looked at all the documentation, I was under the impression that all of that documentation had been given to the Planning Commission and was before the Planning Commission. Now I'm not so sure. So I will ask the applicant and or the architect, is there any information that we have before us, the council, that wasn't already presented to the Planning Commission?
From the architectural standpoint, no, we have not changed anything. From the neighborhood responses, yes, as Layla said on August 20th, some dates they canvassed the neighborhood. So that's what's new.
All right, thank you.
I just want to confirm that with staff. The only thing that we have new that the Planning Commission didn't have are additional responses from neighbors. Is that correct, Mr. Morrow?
That is correct.
Thank you. Ms. Pravetti?
I just want to add that the way you can tell what went to the Planning Commission is that the Planning Commission staff report and all of the plans are attached to the council's report. And you will see that the exhibits that went to Planning Commission are the plans that the architect is referring to.
Thank you, Ms. Pravetti. Okay, we've heard from the appellant and the applicant, and now I'm going to open up to members of the public. If you'd like to speak, you have 3 minutes to do so. If you hear, and this is something I say all the time, if you hear the point that you want to make made well and eloquently by someone else, consider whether you need to make it also. Deborah Johnson.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
My name is Deborah Johnson, and along with my husband, Marty, and 2 sons, we are the tenants residing at 150 Robin Way. We share a fence, the north fence, with Layla and Mehrdad Decordi, and have lived in this wonderful and caring neighborhood for over 2 years. We've been in Los Gatos for 10. We would like to express our sincere support for the Decordis' proposed new home and hope this council will deny the appeal. The Decordis have made every effort to communicate with us and address any questions or concerns we had regarding the design and their construction plans. They did so always in the most respectful and kind way possible and throughout the process. I think the design they have chosen is lovely. It has a modern and refreshing twist to the typical ranch-style house in the area, and I think will bring some architectural diversity to Robin Way. This more modern design would be in line with a number of houses in surrounding streets like Hilo and Marchmont. Frankly, even if we did not like their design, we would still appreciate that they have chosen something slightly different. We strongly believe that diversity of house styles in any neighborhood, obviously within certain guidelines, is actually what makes for more beautiful and hopeful neighborhoods and avoids the cookie cutter feel. These are good people who have worked really hard to get to this point, and I hope that their dream house will be approved once and for all. With my remaining time, I want to just share with you a brief statement of support I received from Lauren Hill, the property manager and the son of the owner of our house. He says that as an architect, I am comfortable that the scale and character of the home will fit well in the neighborhood and will have no significant negative impacts on neighboring properties, including ours. In fact, I find it to be a welcome addition to the Stony Brook neighborhood in which I grew up. Privacy concerns can be addressed with fencing and landscaping. I am unaware of any significant views to the north that would be impacted by the proposal. The lateral views are just the roofscape of neighboring houses. The backdrop of large trees is unaffected. I understand that many folks are resistant to change, but I believe incremental change is beneficial, even crucial, to maintaining the vitality of the built environment. The Decordis have worked patiently and diligently with their architect and the neighbors throughout the process, respectfully playing by the rules all the way. They should be allowed to build this home. Thank you all for your consideration. Sincerely, Lauren Hill, and also to wrap up, sincerely from Deborah and Marty Johnson. Thank you.
Ms. Johnson, thank you very much. Let's see if there are any questions for you. I don't see any, so thank you. The next person I have with hand raised is Bob Buxton.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
This timer is intimidating. Anyway, good evening, council and staff. I've modified my presentation a bit, but I'm here to speak in support of the appellant and to his right of privacy and quality of life. I know there was conversation about an error on the part of the Planning Commission. There was an error made, and who made the error? Not notifying the appellant or the rest of the neighborhood that the Planning Commission meeting was a de novo meeting. There is an error, and that is it. It is indeed a very tight neighborhood of 32 homes. The CCNRs references lots 1 through 32, tract number 1672. Stony Brook, the CCNRs should definitely be visited, and some of the things previously stated might be in conflict. 146 Robin Way, they're wonderful people. They have an overzealous architect who should know better, having been in businesses in this town since 1996. And the neighborhood is in turmoil. The first time in 38 years that we've lived here that this neighborhood is in turmoil. It's uncomfortable. It's not fair to those of us that live in these three streets, Stony Brook, Cardinal, and Robin Way. There was a meeting by the architect, and by invitation only 5 residents. This was on May 23rd, 2 from Cardinal, 3 from Robin. The architect showed new plans. The result afterwards is in his letter where he said, afterwards, we regroup. Next steps, we acknowledge there are still major differences in viewpoints and that the changes proposed, while significant in our minds, were not enough for anyone to announce their support. Poor communications have existed since the beginning, and they exist now. It all started with Exhibit 15 back in February, where a number of the residents portrayed exuberant approval for the process, which is totally and completely incorrect. Communications in this neighborhood are very easy. A neighbor lady walked the neighborhood Sunday afternoon and passed out notices and visited about no Labor Day potluck. I got to move on quickly here. The 32 home map that you have in your package, there are 16 residents that are opposed to the project. That is a little over 50%. And I think that 50-50 was mentioned earlier. If you looked at the same logic for Robin Way, there are 4 in support and 5 do not. All the neighborhood requests.
And Mr. Buxton, I'm sorry, but your time is up. You've got a little red square there.
Can I make my recommendation?
I believe your recommendation is going to be to uphold the appeal, but you can say it yourself.
Thank you very much for your help.
Okay.
Adopt a resolution to grant the appeal and remand the application back to the Planning Commission with specific direction, page 231, item B1. Thank you so much for doing the right thing.
Mr. Rennie, you have a question.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Mr. Buxton, you said 16 property owners are against it. That seems to be in contradiction to all the emails that are in our packet. Are you sure these 16 weren't in opposition before and have changed their mind after the changes? Who are the 16?
I can give you the addresses. 100 and 130 Stony Brook, okay. 159, 149, 123, 103, 100, 110, 120, 130, and 150 Cardinal, 106, 118, 122, 130 just became an approval, 136 and 140 Robin Way 16. Now,
Thank you for whoever, I'm sorry, Mr. Buxton, whoever put that map up, thank you. Mr. Buxton, if you want to refer to this map that's now up on our screen, is there anything that's now incorrect that you're contending is incorrect about that map?
I think you're mostly listing the ones that they claim are no response. Is that correct?
That is not entirely correct. So no response means that there's not an approval. There are tenants that have given their approval, and that's wonderful. 2 of those tenants, the homeowners, are executors of their parents' estate, and they are protecting their tenants. That's wonderful. Everybody in this neighborhood are wonderful people. We have a problem. The appellant has come to the DRC, the Planning Commission, and now the County Council for consideration to do the right thing. The right thing can be done if you take it back to the Planning Commission. There has been an error, but tell me who made the error about not advising that it was a de novo meeting at the Planning Commission. If that had been known, there'd be a whole different sequence of events at this point in time, because you've listened to the Planning Commission meetings. They were leaning towards not approving the applicant.
Mr. Buxton, thanks you. Does that answer your question, Mr. Rennie?
Yes.
Okay. May I request, please, that the share screen be taken off, because when it goes on, I can't see the participants. Thank you. Were there any other questions for Mr. Buxton? Okay, Mr. Gordon-Yamati.
Mayor Jensen, Vice Mayor Spector, Council Members Steyak and Rennie. My name is Gordon Yamate. I'm always grateful for the time and hard work that you folks are providing to the town of Los Gatos, especially during these challenging times, and your efforts to making Los Gatos a more inclusive community. I'm just going to highlight a couple of things that have been mentioned already, but I think maybe this will shed a little bit more light on them. I really found the comments of Mr. Hill to be really instructive, and the point that I thought really made sense to me as I thought about this and about the neighborhood being so concerned about retaining this ranch style that is the standard. That's the only thing you can build in this neighborhood. I doubt today that anyone contemplating the construction of a brand new home in Los Gatos would choose to build a ranch style home. Residential home design, as Mr. Hill pointed out, is not static, but it changes, it evolves over time. With respect to the privacy point, and there's been, when I read Mr. Hill's comments, it to me pointed out a certain irony about the whole situation, that I just couldn't help note that the applicant's neighbors, whose house sits above grade to the applicant and whose roof line will still be higher than the applicant's proposed new home, that they're the ones raising privacy concerns when these concerns would logically belong to the DeCourtys. As a practical matter, the DeCourtys will be the ones shouldering the burden of how to keep neighbors from peering into their yard, peering into their home. And they're actually the party suffering from block views of our neighboring hillside to the south. And then finally, just with respect to this, the map, and sort of, I guess, the assumption that if you didn't respond or you chose not to respond, that meant you weren't in support of the DeCourtys' of their project. And my concern with that is I think there are a number of people that really paused when it came time to put their name on the list. I just don't think it could be assumed that they're opposed to the proposed design. I suspect many likely did not want to offend the appellant by choosing sides. I know that, at least for me, that was a consideration for me. And I hope the appellant understands that we can agree to disagree on the issues that have been raised. But we felt it was really important to voice our concerns in the interest of fairness and out of respect for our neighbors, because we know, having rebuilt our home in 2005, how challenging and momentous building a new home for your family can be.
And Mr. Yamati, you've got a red square. So that means your time is up. Thank you very much for your comments this evening. Let's see if there's any questions for you. There are not, so thank you very much. I don't see anyone else who's a member of the public as opposed to an applicant or appellant who wants to talk. So I'm going to close out what I'm going to call the general portion of the public hearing, if I might. And then Mr. Schultz, I thought you said that I was going to the applicant first rather than the appellant. Is that correct? And Ms. Pravetti's nodding at me, so I'll take that as a yes.
That's correct. Yes, that's correct.
Okay,
The appellant has the last say.
3 minutes, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
3 minutes each.
All right, so Mr. Colsat.
Okay. Obviously, this is a very close-knit community. I think it's on the dangerous side when we get into a popularity contest on architecture, on landscape, on privacy, and what we're doing. This design has been vetted with the town's consulting architect, with experienced staff members, and with ultimately the planning commission. I do appreciate, pardon me, everybody's input. However, this is the DeCourty's home. I've done my best to design a beautiful home for them. I think what we have right now is extremely modest, but handsome, stylish home that blends very well with the neighborhood and will fit in once it's all done. People are gonna change their mind, and I who knows, I might get another job, but that's not why I do this. I do this for my clients, and we've worked many, many hours to get these things right. We initially looked at a 2-story, said, no way, we're not doing a 2-story. We looked at a real modern house. We're not gonna do a modern house. We looked at the modern farmhouse, a popular house you see everywhere with the white siding and the dark windows, and those have gable ends, which are actually more massive than the home that we have now. This does have elements that are picked from other ranch homes. So we have elements that connect to the ranch, but we also have a transition that goes more to the modern. I think that the DeCourtys have done more than most of my clients have as far as neighborhood outreach. For a 1-story home, which in most streets, this would just been approved at the DRC level, and we would already be halfway under construction. So I thank you for all your time. I stand behind this as a very proud architect. I'm very proud of this project and what we've done, and I'm very proud of Layla and Merdad for sticking to it and not backing down to pressure because they know they are doing what's right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Colsat. Any questions for the architect? Okay, I don't see any. That brings us to the appellant. Mr. Zaki, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'll make a couple comments. I appreciate Gordon's comments relative to the neighborhood discord. I will say that I have spoken with many of my neighbors with respect to this. And, again, this is a tight-knit neighborhood. Everybody is very concerned about discord. So, many neighbors have responded in a neutral fashion and not taken one side or the other relative to neighborhood discord. I do believe, this is my personal opinion, that sending out a communication relative to are you in or are you out is divisive. So I think that exacerbates the whole situation. So anyway, so those are my thoughts in that regard. I just want to make a couple of comments again about my main concern is about due process. And I don't believe that that occurred. And I don't believe the DRC addressed a lot of the concerns. And I'm going to go through a list in my last minute and 43 seconds of things that Mr. Kolstad did not address that the town architect expressed concerns about. Multiple low slope roof pitches are not consistent with the residential design guidelines. 3.5.1, unify roof pitches. Front elevation, complexity of forms and materials is not consistent with the residential design guidelines. Right? Or the architectural style, stone, wood siding, and stucco. Mr. Kolstad reduced the height of one element and put an eave over the other element, and the only reason the height was reduced was because he reduced the height of the seal of the roof. What else? Metal roofing is not consistent with the RDG. 3.8.2, select materials that are sensitive to the surrounding neighborhood. Design home entries with sensitivity to the surrounding neighborhood. Changing materials in the same plane is not consistent with the RDG 3.8.4. Simplify the wood pop-ups at the rear elevation, awkward and complex forms. I mean, it just extend a sloping roof in front of the pop-up at the right elevation. Limit wood siding to accent locations. Limit the prominence of garage. I know the garage was revived. And the only other thing I'll mention is that 146 Robin Way is not in alignment with the scope and scale with the typical Stony Brook neighborhood. Again, scope and scale. Only one home in the neighborhood is similar in size to the proposed structure on 146 Robin Way, and it sits on a lot that's almost twice the size.
And Mr. Zaki, that is your 3 minutes.
May I close with one final comment, Madam Mayor?
If it takes less than 2 seconds.
146 Robin Way is 4,245 square feet. It's on a 13,000 square foot lot. 126 Robin Way is 4,500 square feet, and it's on a 25,000 square foot lot.
Thank you. We have that in our staff report. So thank you. Questions for Mr. Zaki? Seeing none, I am going to close the public hearing on this matter. And first look to members of the council for questions that they may have of staff. Okay, I do not see any. So I'm now going to look to council for discussion and or motion. All right, since no one's starting, whenever no one starts, I'll start. Well, actually, let me start with a generalized question that everyone can get an easy A on. Please indicate, Mr. Rennie, did you visit the site? And do you have anything to add to the record? Yes, you did. Ms. Sayak? Yes. Ms. Spector? Yes, and I visited the site as well. Okay. So with that easy one, I will start with my comments. I walked the neighborhood the other day with my dog, and I came up the street and was expecting to see orange netting that went 10 feet above everyone else. I was expecting to see encroachments on setbacks. I was expecting to see something that I didn't see at all. So when I went to look at it, I thought, why are we having an appeal? It's one story. It seems to be the same height. It seems to fit in. The Planning Commission took care of the screening. That was the issue. And now we are spending a lot of time on whether or not the DRC, which is designed as a streamlined administrative process, which is safeguarded by having the right to appeal, which actually happened here, which resulted in some changes, and then went to the Planning Commission, where they had a discussion of the issue that was on appeal. So question is, I guess, why are we now here, to my mind, discussing a house that's not the largest in the neighborhood by either FAR or square footage, that fits the height, that fits the setback, and this where the screening is taken care of? If we normally approach this kind of thing at both Planning Commission and Town Council level, this would be fine. So why are we looking at it? I think we're looking at it because of what was mentioned by Ms. Johnson, is a hesitancy to accept a more modern, streamlined design that's not what people are used to. A metal roof is frankly a smart idea in a wildfire area. It's used frequently. It looks like it fits in. This is just different. And we should not, and I, for one, will not ever, or in this circumstance, make a determination about a decision for the town based on counting anything. Counting who comes, counting how many say yes, counting how many say no. Instead, listen to the argument, look at the documents, determine whether it fits with our guidelines, see if there's been any argument that convinces me one way or the other that I'm mistaken in the decision I should make. I think that it's proof that the process actually worked here, that we're here discussing something that the appellant is arguing he didn't get a notice about to whether to discuss. We're here discussing it. So leaving aside whether I personally, as a trial lawyer, think it's okay to discuss an issue that wasn't raised below and saying, okay, I'm going to do that. Even if I take into account the comments that were sort of made as asides by the Planning Commission with respect to design, I cannot personally find anything untoward about this design. I think it does fit with the neighborhood. It is the right height. It is not gone to one story. It is not obstructing anything. It just looks more modern. And to my mind, that is no reason to upend this application and overturn two decisions that have been made by planning bodies, the DRC and the Planning Commission, to approve the project. So without making motion, that's my speech. Let's see what other people have to say. Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor. I also had sort of the same surprise as you did. When we first got a notice there was going to be an appeal here, I rode my bike by off and do the loop up Kennedy and back around Shannon, so it's an easy detour. And I also, said, I was again expecting, I heard privacy issues. I was expecting tall story poles also. And then from the front of the house, I'm like, well, I can't understand what the problem was. I later got an invitation to meet at a social distance with masks in the backyard and asked the applicant a little more detail of what the issues were. And then, I again, as you could tell from the questions that I was asking when we started, I was a little bit confused about, or were we sure we knew which house we were talking about? Because Mr. Zaki said that the Bob Cannon's review of the house were not addressed. Well, so I did see, in the initial, the second, and the third, it looked like they were addressed a lot, and I could understand the first picture of the house being pretty shocking, with the wall that kind of went above the eave line and the garage with all the window and the metal on that. And then the changes seemed like they had softened it a lot to make it fit with the neighborhood. So that's why I really wanted to understand, or which one were we talking about? And I wanted to make sure Mr. Zaki, was looking at the later one and not the first one. And I was going to ask him more questions, but he kind of answered the questions. I'm like, okay, what do you think is still wrong? And he went through a list of everything that was mentioned by Bob Cannon. And sometimes things are minor things that weren't addressed. So I started thinking, well, I don't know what you would change to satisfy Mr. Zaki, it seems like he just doesn't want the house there. Because, normally I'm like, well, if there's something that really makes the difference, maybe we can change that one thing. Overall, again, we can't be afraid of letting things evolve a little bit. And with the house toned down, it does seem like it's just a minor evolution from a ranch house. As you said, we've got to allow metal roofs because that in today's world, that's smart for fire. They're not very far from the hillside, actually, off of Kennedy. So I guess those are my comments for now. Let's see what others have to say.
Ms. Spector?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My input relates to process. Actually, if this were before the council purely as an ANS application, I find the design interesting and not necessarily, wouldn't be something that I would turn down as out of hand. But that's not where we are. We're actually dealing with a process issue. This issue its application went before the Planning Commission. And it went before the Planning Commission, as one of the planning commissioners said, and it has been raised here this evening, de novo. So the Planning Commission was looking at this with new eyes, with de novo eyes. And when you read through the Planning Commission's record, what you will find is that the issue of the scope of their review came up a lot. Commissioner Birch stated that, I think she ended up voting against it, but anyway, she stated that she would have liked to examine the issue of the roof. Mr. Hudes is the one who mentioned de novo review. Ms. Badami said that she felt compelled or forced to limit the scope of her review or discussion. Ms. Hansen made her decision based on the limited wording of the appeal. So even though I might have one view or the other view about the design of the house and the architecture of the house, that is not what is before us. What is before us is that the Planning Commission did not get to review this application in total, and they should have been able to do that.
Ms. Sayak, any discussion?
Yes, I'll go ahead since I'm the last one and try for a motion and see if we can get some discussion. I think there's a lot of discussion about process, and I think Mr. The appellant had discussed, he believes that an error was made and he just wasn't sure where the error was. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to really focus on the appeal and the process that we have before us. And again, the question I had asked is, has the appellant bared the burden to prove that there was an error or abuse of discretion by the Planning Commission? The de novo discussion did come up. And for whatever reason, if they felt that they were limiting their scope, I don't think that was an error on their part. I think that what they were trying to do is they were trying to reach a compromise, which is something that many of us try to do as we go through these difficult, contentious neighborhood homes. So I don't believe that there was an error. I think there was a lot of discussion. In fact, I think the Planning Commission did a great discussion and ultimately came to a decision. And so for that reason, I move to deny the appeal of the Planning Commission, decision, which approved a request for demolition and construction of a new single-family residence on property zoned R110 located at 146 Robin Way.
All right, thank you, Councilwoman Sayak. I'm going to second that motion. Let's look for discussion on the motion, if there is any, before I call the question. I don't see anybody with their hands raised, so I'm going to call the question. Mr. Rennie?
Yes.
Councilwoman Sayak?
Yes.
Vice Mayor?
No.
Mayor votes yes, passes 3-1. The appeal is denied. So we're going to move on to our last item of this evening, which is item number 10. which is the discussion of a potential bicycle pedestrian crossing on Blossom Hill. And Mr. Morley, will you be giving us a report on that?
No, it will be Ying Smith.
Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Smith, I'm sorry. I knew that.
Good evening. I'm going to make sure my camera is on. While we are doing that, actually, I'm going to share my screen to be able to actually show you the PowerPoint presentation. So,
so Ms. Smith, there's some buzzing going on your microphone, and I don't know if that is something we can fix.
Let me try one more time. Is it working better now?
It's still buzzing, but we'll get through it. It's okay, go ahead.
I think, Ying, if you just go ahead and share your screen and maybe turn off your video and use your audio only, it might help. Thank you.
All right, let me try one more time. Is it any better?
Not really, but go ahead.
Yeah, I apologize. And I'm in the process.
I believe Aaron can bring up the slideshow if you want to just tell him which slides to advance.
Yes, please. Thank you. Again, good evening, Transportation and Mobility Manager. The Highway 17 bicycle and pedestrian overcrossing is one of the Connect Los Gatos projects. The project team is made up of PPW staff and a consulting team led by BKF engineers. And tonight, the BKF engineers project manager, Jackie Bandal, is also in attendance. So after 11 months of work in evaluating the different alternatives and conducting extensive community engagement, we're ready to present our findings and recommendations. I'm very excited about this opportunity to share project highlights with you. The presentation is an overview. For additional background information, one can find it in the staff report, as well as in the draft feasibility study and the community engagement report. The last two reports are on the available on the project website because they're pretty lengthy reports. And do we need to, oh, good, thank you for the PowerPoint. The next slide, please. We have the presentation outline here, and I want to get to the project location. This project was initiated due to the need for bicycles, cyclists and pedestrians to cross Highway 17. Blossom Hill is one of the 5 existing crossings over 17 within the town, and this one is centrally located. It provides access to several key destinations. So it has the highest bicycle and pedestrian counts among all crossings. At the March 3rd meeting, the Town Council approved the project's purpose and need. Next slide, please. The next one would like to show you this overview of the project phases and milestones. We started the feasibility study in September 2019, and this is the very first step in a pretty long process to develop and design a project this scale. The chart shows the different phases and also a best case scenario schedule for construction. We will talk about the alternatives. We started with 3 alternatives. Next slide, please. Yes. And we had the first round of outreach back in February this year. We received pretty intense, extensive public comments as well as feedback from Caltrans. So just a very brief kind of walk you through how we get to this point. Alternative one is to connect to Miano to both the east and west of Highway 17. And we get a lot of feedback from the community saying that they don't really want to see this kind of project going straight to the neighborhood. Project alternative 3 includes the widening of the existing bridge, and this alternative actually will present the most engineering and cost challenges because the existing bridge doesn't meet the vertical clearance standard. In order to widen it, we will need a design exception from Caltrans, and it's highly unlikely the town will be able to get one. So this alternative was rejected at the very beginning, and it was confirmed by the town council at the March 3rd meeting. The next slide would like to show you that we actually use a set of criteria to guide the evaluation process to look at the three alternatives. Without going into the details, the key takeaway is that the recommendation for the preferred alternative was based on this best practice industry process that takes into account community feedback, user experience, engineering considerations, and environmental constraints. So the next one, our recommendation is to choose the preferred alignment alternative 2, which is a separate bypass overcrossing, which is BPOC, just south of Blossom Hill Road. In the last two slides, I talk about the constraints of this project. Next, I would actually really like to talk about the benefits of this alternative. In this particular design, we're able to provide a separate structure for bicyclists and pedestrians. And there's a bend in the curve that helps slow down the westbound cyclists traveling downhill, and because access speed can be a concern in this kind of structure. And next, I want to highlight, like, in addition to the separate structure, we also are recommending a pretty wide bridge, 16 to 20 feet wide. And the width we ask for a range because that allows us some flexibility. And there's sufficient space for us to provide a two-way cycle track and separate bicycles and pedestrians. Our community, as well as the Complete Streets and Transportation Commission, provide very valuable feedback in this process to help us in this design these features. We took into consideration the safety and comfort of all users of different ages and abilities. These considerations are really important as we are hoping to build a facility that people will use and therefore encourage more people to replace some of the car trips with biking and walking trips. Next, I want to just quickly show you some pictures of the three bridge structure types. The first one is a concrete bridge. The second one is a steel truss bridge. And the third type is a steel arch bridge. The recommendation today is that all three types are feasible and appropriate for this location. We're recommending keeping all three types in consideration as we move to the next step. Then the council can, based on additional information, can make a decision as we move forward in this process. Before wrapping up, I'd like to touch briefly on the funding plan. The table I show here is the same as table 2 in your council report. In the current phase is the feasibility study. It's fully funded and we're wrapping it up. The next phase is final design that includes many sub-phases into it. The budget is roughly $3.7 million, and it will be funded by the Measure B grant as well as the town funds. This is pending the town council's approval on a later date. We haven't secured funding for construction, and the cost is estimated to be almost $25 million. The current funding plan is to apply for grants to fund the construction phase. The total cost of the project, including all phases, is estimated to be $28.9 million. And this is based on the most expensive bridge type for us to come up with the estimate. In conclusion, we have shared with the council and the community in the past that this is a large-scale project. Next slide, please. It is expensive and it takes a long time. We are following a typical process of making progress and then bring decision points to you for your consideration at the key milestones. This evening, we're asking you to consider the staff recommendations as in the staff report and this slide. And if approved, we will start the final design phase by early next year. And during that process, staff plan to return to you at key milestones for your decisions, including the 35% design, which would take about 12 to 14 months. And the next milestone is environmental clearance. That will be about 24 months from the beginning, and then get to the 65% design, 95 and 100% design. And our schedule is roughly takes 36 months for us to get to the point of wrapping up the final design and go out for bid if we have the construction dollars. So we are in the best case scenario, getting all the design components approved, asked for your approval in 3 years. And so we are still many years away and many $1 million away from construction, but it's helpful for us to make some progress as we finish our work and ask for your input. This concludes my presentation, and staff and our consultant is available to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Look to the council for questions for Ms. Smith. I don't see any, so I am going to open it up for speakers. Again, use your icon to raise your electronic hand, and I will call on you. Jacob Schroeder.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm here today on behalf of every homeowner in the Ohlone Court neighborhood, and I'm also here as a parent of 3 kids who attend Van Meter Elementary School. My wife and I have walked our kids to school each day for the last 3 years since my youngest was in kindergarten. And for what it's worth, our neighborhood is one of the few neighborhoods that sends kids as young as TK, which is 4 years old, over that crossing daily to get to Van Meter. I support ways to improve the safety of the Blossom Hill crossing. And in fact, each of the days the town had counters on that bridge, which was a week before we all shut down school, I saw them, and I know my family comprised at least a dozen of those crossings on each day. It seems like the comments are in uniform support of this goal, which is improving the safety of this crossing, and I wholeheartedly agree. But I am here today to voice my objection to the planning process to date, and I'm asking the council to take a prudent, measured approach rather than rush to lock us into a Band-Aid solution that this entire community will have to endure and maintain for many, many years to come. Specifically, I'm asking the council to table this matter so that further community input can be taken into account and to instruct the staff to further coordinate with Caltrans. Instead of rehashing every point in the letter we submitted, I wanted to make 6 brief points with my time today. And to be clear, the issue is not whether we should increase safety on Blossom Hill Crossing, because on that, I think we all agree. The issue is whether the proposal on the table is truly the best we can do and whether this option is a prudent use of 30 million taxpayer dollars. First, the Ohlone Court neighborhood cares about safety. In this neighborhood, we have students, teachers, and a former principal of Los Gatos schools. I personally bought into this neighborhood 3 years ago because of how I could walk my kids to school, to restaurants, to the park, and to the grocery stores. Second, the process has been hasty and disorganized. Prior to today's council meeting, I'm aware of 2 prior meetings by staff on this. First, there was a meeting earlier this year on February 25th that was advertised only on Los Gatos Creek Trail, and nothing was delivered to the residences in Ohlone Court. We were told at that time that it was very early in the process, that staff was considering alternatives, and we were encouraged to sign up to get email alerts. I did, and I never saw any. Second, there was a meeting last week on August 25th. Our neighborhood was notified 2 days prior to that meeting by flyers dropped on our doorstep. We were told that the key details were still not worked out, namely the bridge structure, the impact to existing retaining walls, the width of the crossing, and so forth. but we were said there was no desire to work with Caltrans on widening the existing Blossom Hill Road. We were told our feedback would be incorporated. After the close of business this past Thursday, after the time for initial comments for this meeting had passed, it was put on today's agenda along with a 110-page report, which provided insufficient time for public comment. The report does not address any of the concerns we raised in February or the August meetings. As just one example, the report says that elementary kids do not cross that bridge. I assure you they do, unless I've been sending my kids to the wrong school for 3 years. I raised this at both the February and August meetings, and if this easy to confirm fact has been overlooked, it calls into question the integrity of the entire process. And this is certainly not the responsible way to deal with spending $30 million. Third, significant details have yet to be resolved, and this should not be locked in. We have detailed many of those in the letter, and I won't rehash them here. Fourth, rather than slap a hastily thought out bridge over Highway 17, I propose the best solution is alternative 3. Work with Caltrans to devise a holistic solution that fixes the Blossom Hill Bridge. And will that be easy? I doubt it, but that is what would be best for our community, and I'd love to see staff rise to that challenge. We all saw what happened in 2018 when the bridge was hit, and it needs to be fixed. Why not widen it at the same time to improve pedestrian safety? There's ample space to widen the north side of the bridge. Visona's on the west, and there's a non-residential development on the east. There'd be no impact to existing residential. Why spend this money to build a separate bridge next to and 6 feet higher than the outdated Blossom Hill Bridge, which would only block views of the hills from Blossom Hill Road, encroach upon established residential neighborhoods, and likely frustrate any efforts by Caltrans when they ultimately decide to touch Blossom Hill Bridge? And if they do, that would simply result in years of continued construction. I've heard concerns about having a bridge on the north side of Blossom Hill that would require some people to cross twice, across Blossom Hill. I have a brief response. A north side crossing would not impact existing residential areas or their investments. Second, the current crossing patterns are dictated by the existing circumstances. First, there's the Blossom Hill Winchester crossing, which is on the south side only. So of course people want to cross to get back there as it is now. If you fix that, then you fix the need to cross twice. For those seeking access to the Los Gatos Creek Trail, access could easily be gained on the north side through Visona Park or Oak Meadow by improved crossings there. Third, I'd like us to study ways to make any crossing of Blossom Hill conducive to cyclers or pedestrians. Oh, I see the signal, sorry, the timer wasn't up.
Yeah, the timer is not on the screen, Mr. Schroeder, you're way over.
All right.
We did get your letter, and I know that we've all read it.
Yep.
So let me see if there's any questions for you.
Thank you.
No, but thank you for your letter and thank you for your comments tonight. And maybe somebody that's working the technology can get that timer back on the screen so that I can see it. Maria Ristow.
Hi. Okay. I would like to use my time to share a video that was produced by the town.
We chose to raise our family here because we really like the small town in a big city feel. And we liked that there was this nice town that was up against the foothills, was really pretty, and it had this fantastic downtown with this great trail that went all the way through the town.
The great thing about Los Gatos is how accessible it is. It's great for biking or walking or running, and my family and I take great advantage of it.
There's Blossom Hill Road at least twice a day to access the Los Gatos Creek Trail or to go to Visona Park with the kids. Blossom Hill Road has some issues, particularly as you cross the 17 on the bridge. It's dangerous because the bike lanes are too narrow and the sidewalks are just not big enough for young children riding a bicycle.
I've actually spent some time on Blossom Hill Road as the children are getting out from school, whether it's at Fisher or Van Meter, and the onslaught of kids is amazing. There's hundreds of kids all on their bikes and scooters, and they're excited. So not always obeying all the rules of which side of the road to be on. But I'm always so nervous for the kids. I mean, these are young kids who are just learning how to ride their bikes or maybe not paying attention. And as traffic's coming across the overpass there, these kids are really close to the traffic.
Ride our bikes and our bike trailers and trail a bike down the sidewalk on Blossom Hill Road. By the time we kind of get towards the bottom, we have picked up so much speed that we'd have to veer around the telephone poles that were in the middle of the sidewalks, and that was really dangerous. So we gave that up pretty quickly. We tried riding down the street, but the street was so narrow and there were so many cars zooming down the street that we didn't feel that that was safe either.
Over Highway 17 is still pretty narrow. I am intimidated by the vehicles being so close to me. So if I have the sidewalk available to me, at least on the uphill, I will ride on the sidewalk, knowing it's not legal, but also recognizing that if I see a pedestrian, I need to get off the sidewalk. But for me, it's safer.
Los Gatos is extremely well connected. Very few communities are fortunate enough to have a resource like the Sona Trail, not to mention all the other streets and bike paths in the city that make it very convenient for you to bike for recreation or to get downtown to go to the farmer's market or shopping. But crossing the 17 is sort of the big barrier. Having a pedestrian pathway is a wonderful resource.
That was time up. So thank you, Ms. Bristow. I'm not going to ask questions of the video or you. Ray, I'm not even going to try to pronounce your last name. It starts with a B.
Yeah, Ray Brisgus. I'm a resident of Ohlone Court, 137 Ohlone Court. And I just want to echo Jacob Schroeder's comments regarding this path. Being directly over the proposed path, again, I was chagrined not to have additional details as to how this will impact my residential neighborhood. I had asked the city to provide a little bit more detail as to whether the sidewalk was going to be widened or how it was going to be widened, whether retaining walls would have to be dismantled and new ones built. Those were all very fuzzy, and I didn't think that we would be at a final approval stage without getting those details. Secondly, I wanted to focus on Jacob's and other residents' vision that maybe the best solution would be working with Caltrans and putting up a single bridge. I really think that having two bridges there, and the proposed bridge is not insubstantial. It is going to be a big structure towering over the existing Blossom Hill Road and encroaching on two residential neighborhoods. I think this wasn't adequately addressed in the pre-planning sessions and would like further discussion with those points. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the speaker? Okay, seeing none. Bob Buxton.
Gosh, I was hoping I would be able to come on when the timer wasn't working, but so be it. So to the individuals that are against the proposed bridge, I totally disagree. I am not speaking as chair of the Complete Streets and Transportation Commission either. I'm speaking as a resident of 38 years, which you already know, 2 sons, van meter, bicycles, pedestrians. We have an unsafe situation for those 2 groups with the existing Blossom Hill Bridge. The existing Blossom Hill Bridge was hit, and we know the consequence of that throughout the town. It is going to get hit again. Caltrans knows it's going to get hit again. It's too low. It was built in the 50s. That needs to be replaced, but that Blossom Hill Bridge will be replaced, and hopefully I'll be able to visit from up above. You're not going to get anywhere with Caltrans, and the attempt has been made to do that. This pedestrian bicycle bridge is awesome. The work that's been done by the consultant, the work that's been done by Ms. Smith, the work that's been done by staff. I'll speak to the commission, not taking any credit for it because I'm speaking as a resident. There are public meetings. There's so much information available in this town. You just have to get it. It's not hard to do. I support this bridge wholeheartedly and compliment the staff. And as you know, the Complete Streets and Transportation Commission approved this project. Thank you.
Mr. Buxton, thank you. Mr. Rennie has a question for you.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Buxton, I know you're very engaged, and I'm sure you were involved in the process quite a bit. Could you speak to why is this the right option? And do you feel like, you know, our report has 3 options. Have we considered all possible options? Are we really down to the right solution?
In my opinion, we're down to the right solution. A concrete bridge, wider the better. Arch, it'll be a beautiful addition to the town. It'll obscure the old Blossom Hill Bridge. It will not, it will be, I worked for a bridge building contractor while I was in college, and so I'm pro bridges. It will be a beautiful bridge. December of 2025 will be here before you know it, and it will be something the town of Los Gatos will be very proud of. If we mess around too long, that $30 million will be $40, $45, $50 million. So let's just approve it and get going.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Buxton? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. Tasia Babelis, hopefully that's close.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hello, Madam Mayor and Town Council members. I'm Tasia Babelis, an Ohlone Court resident of 24 years, an original owner here, and also a teacher at Louise Van Meter of 22 years. I totally agree with my neighbor, Jacob Schroeder, who spoke so nicely about the subject. Let me be clear to the Town Council members and people listening, the Ohlone Court residents are not against building a bridge. We are thrilled by the recent improvements the town has made for bikers and pedestrians. We're thrilled that the town is working on a plan to keep all of its citizens safe, especially for all of the kids biking and walking to school. At this time, I would like to extend an invitation to council members and project managers to meet with the Ohlone Court residents or to visit the homeowners' backyards, which back up right onto Blossom Hill Road. Tonight, I'm here to talk to you about my concerns as a resident about this project. The way the project is outlined, it will no doubt have a direct impact on my home, my backyard, quality of life, and possibly the value. First, I disagree with Ying Smith that neighbors were notified. We were not. I'm disappointed that the town and the project managers notified the affected neighbors about a plan for a 20-foot wide bridge being built on the Blossom Hill side just about 2 weeks ago. I would think the town would have done a better job at informing residents of Ohlone Court, those on Blossom Hill Road, Sierra Court, Silker Road, and the Los Gatos Oaks apartment complex in advance, basically to have included all of us stakeholders in such an important and expensive project. Secondly, as you remember, in 2018, a truck was hit the bottom of the bridge that crosses over 17, and as a result, the bridge was closed for 6 months. This had a huge impact on our entire community, going to work, shopping, and our day-to-day lives. Traffic was a mess. That bridge is still too low, and that should have that is a major safety concern for all of us in town. Why not dovetail this project along with Caltrans to build both a bridge that is correct in height as well as a pedestrian bike bridge that can coexist safely up to code and that is aesthetically pleasing. spending roughly $30 million to build a bridge next to and 6 feet higher than an outdated bridge on Blossom Hill just doesn't make fiscal sense. Thirdly, I'm concerned about the impact on the Vasona Heights benefit zone on the other side of my fence. Ohlone Court pays extra property tax each year and has for decades to establish and maintain this zone. What are the ramifications and impact to the hillside and the current?
Ms. Babelis, your time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see if there are any questions for you. There are not, so thank you very much. And again, we do have the letter from the Homeowners Association. Rodney Smith.
Hi, good evening. This is Rodney Smith. I'm also a homeowner on Ohlone Court. So I appreciate what my neighbors have added in here. Between myself and my family, I have 4 kids and my wife, we probably passed and walked over the Blossom Hill Bridge close to 100,000 times. So we're very well aware of the safety concerns over there. We've seen too many close calls. So like others within the neighborhood, we're all for increasing the safety over there. What I'm really looking for is a deeper study into the bridge and how it really impacts the neighborhoods, and especially my neighborhood that I'm really looking out for. I do back up right against where the pathway, the bridge will be, and I'm concerned about what that impact's going to be. I asked questions at the last meeting last week, and there was, well, we'll have to see what that is as we get into the further study. I was not aware that we were going to go full bore into the final planning stages without any more information. Really what I'm looking for is, before we do the full go ahead on this, let's get the study done. We already had the sidewalk widening done on the other side of Blossom Hill, going up towards Van Meter and Fisher. And that looks like part of that's going to have to get redone again. So let's get the planning complete and get it signed off and understood before we actually launch on this. And that's really my primary request. I think widening, making a bigger area for people to walk, very good. That's all the right thing for all of us. So like I said, and I'll reiterate, let's finish the plan before we start moving.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. Any questions? Mr. Rennie has a question for you.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Schmidt, I should have been asking all the Ohlone Court's speakers, but maybe you can speak for them or speak for yourself. Have you studied alternative 1? Would that be a preferable alternative?
So alternative 1, I looked at it. The alternative 1, it wasn't very clear where it actually comes out. If it actually comes into Ohlone Court or it actually comes onto the Creek Trail. But it looks like that was sort of dismissed without all the details. Okay. Yeah, for what I was looking for is just really understanding how it's going to impact my house and the backside of the neighborhood there.
Thank you.
Which was not done. Yep.
Other questions? Okay, thank you very much. Rami Kanama. And as soon as you're unmuted, you can go ahead and talk. We'll let you know. You're still unmuted. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. So I also live on Ohlone Court, and I serve as a board member of the HOA along with Jacob Schroeder. And you're hearing a common theme here, and that's because of the process that we were just hit with this a couple of weeks ago. Never seen anything about this proposal until an email from a neighbor came to us. Have you seen this? And as Jacob mentioned, a flyer was dropped off at the front door a couple of days before the meeting last week. So I don't think there's a disagreement about a proposal to improve bicycle and pedestrian movement. I have two kids, a kindergarten and a second grader that go to school. So we do use the bridge and we need improvement. But I think what you're hearing is, disagreement in the process. I think the entire neighborhood agree that there's going to be a huge impact on the neighbors, on the properties that we pay so much here, and we pay taxes to maintain portion of the retaining wall there. And if I look at and you all have Google Map and you can look at it right now, if you look at the other bridges, the Highway 9 bridge, the Main Street bridge, the Lark bridge, they all have the same issue. This is the only one that is right next to residential on both sides of the bridge. And the proposal is to put a 20-foot wide bridge right next to an existing bridge, 6 foot higher. I mean, it was just an ugly proposal that was just slapped together. Again, no disagreement with the proposal as a whole. Where it should be, what it should look like, it needs to be thought out. And the outreach to the neighborhood needs to be done a lot better than what we have today.
Okay, thank you, sir. See if there's any questions. I don't see any. I don't see anyone else with their hands raised. And what? There's one, John Smart.
Hi, thank you very much for your time tonight. I'm going to actually just focus on a couple of very specific issues. I think everything else has been largely covered in pretty good detail. One is this.
And Mr. Smart, I'm going to interrupt you for a moment. I'm assuming that you are in Ohlone Court?
That is correct. Yes,
Thank you.
I'm like Tasia, basically a 24-year resident here, and I have a lot that backs up against the benefit zone, which Tasia was describing.
Thank you.
Yes. So the very specific issues I want to take my time to point out are the alternative that's currently kind of on the table for Blossom Hill is kind of being presented as an all or nothing thing. It's like, would you like this alternative? Yes or no? I think there could be several different versions of this alternative. As already discussed, there could be an omnibus, comprehensive solution with Caltrans, but there could also be other versions, such as one leveraging basically the open space, or one that basically scales back this bridge from 20 feet to something more suitable for proximity to a residential zone. So I want to emphasize that this is not an all or nothing thing, that even if you decided that, no, we really want it here, that you could refine that and take into consideration some of the issues that are raised by the Los Gatos Glen HOA, so that there's a reasonable compromise. The other issue I wanted to point out is, and this is in the letter, but I want to emphasize it a little bit. So we are in a low density R1 single family residential zone. If you look at the general plan and you look at basically half the policies under the land use or the noise considerations, this project would basically violate, in my estimation, a good percentage of them. One of the key focuses of the general plan is to preserve the character and tranquility of neighborhoods. Putting a 20-foot corridor basically right next to our subdivision will absolutely destroy the northeast border of the subdivision with a bunch of noise and stuff that we just really don't need. I mean, we're between 17 and Blossom Hill as it is, there's enough already going on without burdening the neighborhood with additional traffic, and so forth. Okay, so those are really the two issues I want to emphasize, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Smart? Seeing none. Once again, I don't have any other hands up. And in a couple seconds, I'm going to close this hearing. Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing to the council for any other questions they might have of staff. Ms. Spector, and then Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A couple of related questions. How much notice were the residents of Ohlone Court given with regard to the meeting. And this meeting, I'm assuming, was this past week, but you can clarify that for me. Tell me how much notice Ohlone Court residents had, and whatever that time frame is, why did they have that amount of time?
Yes, thank you for the question. We had two public meetings. The first one was in February, and the second one was last week. And in both cases, we sent out direct mails, and that was roughly 10 days ahead of time. We realized some residents told us that in the last meeting that they didn't receive the mail. So we quickly did a door hanger distribution. So then each house got one. In addition, we also had posts on all the social media network, and also use the project website as a way to send out the information. And all the details are documented in the community engagement report.
And so so I understand better, you did send something by mail and you did something on the door, or am I misunderstanding you?
Correct, that's correct.
Okay. And is there some reason, well, let's skip that. Does the proposed bridge, is it in the Ohlone Court benefit zone, or is outside of it? Is it above it, below it? Where is it?
Okay, I would like to ask, we can show the PowerPoint again, and since I'm not sure if mine is working, we have a couple additional slides we can show. If we can do that, is slide number 18. And I would like to just take a moment to explain. I know there are a lot of questions about the impacts, and with this level of work, there are some questions we cannot answer. That's one of the reasons why we need to roll into final design. So now we can see the PowerPoint. So this is something we look at, the Vasona Heights benefit zone and the town right away. And this is what we show where the approach to the bridge will be. And we are very confident that the entire structure will be within the public right of way and outside of the benefit zone. And we were not able to show this one at the meeting last week, so I think that may cause some confusion.
Ms. Spector, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so Ms. Smith, thank you very much. Mr. Rennie, then you had a question?
Yeah, probably a couple of them. So I'll start with the picture you just showed us. We're talking about the bridge, once we get to 17, is going to be higher than the current bridge, and I can see why that would be concern as it passes the neighborhood. Are you able to keep the ramp up to the bridge low so it's not towering over this neighborhood, and then get the last bit of height as you get close to 17?
That's a very good interpretation. Yes, the 6 feet above the existing bridge, that's when the bridge span is over 17. On the approach, that's when before the bridge, like that's both to the east and west of Highway 17, that span, we can keep it pretty low, especially on this approach. We have quite a bit of length to work with. And our current estimate, this will be just above the current sidewalk. And so the approach itself is not going to be 6 feet above the current grade.
And is there a lot of screening there then? Isn't there a hillside there, if I'm remembering correctly, and trees at the top?
Yeah, we actually, if we don't mind sharing the screen for slide 19, we do have a Google Street View to show that is just a straight street view. And yes, there are trees.
It's coming up question.
And you said it's going to be just above the height of this sidewalk for quite a ways?
Yes.
Okay. And you mentioned that you need to do more work to know better the effect on the neighborhood. Explain to me that better. What more could the neighborhood learn if we allow you, as you said, go towards final design? What more would we learn? And would we be able to work with the neighbors and adjust as we go during that design process?
Yes, completely. So I just want to take a moment to explain the process. And I think there's a lot of misunderstanding. And as I mentioned, this is the very, very first phase. It's a feasibility study. And this, what we really want to get out is to understand which alternative is feasible and which one is the best. We are not, we are about 1 year away, assuming we can start final design very soon as January. We're still going to take about 12 to 14 months to get to the 35% design. That is a huge milestone. The 35% design, and the next step is environmental clearance. That's when we know exactly where the lines will be. And then whether, like, for example, someone mentioned the retaining wall, whether that retaining wall needs to be rebuilt, and whether we can actually walk within the roadway, or we need to go into the town right away. But we're very confident, given the space we have here on actual both sides, we're going to walk within the public right way and outside of the benefit zone.
And then my last question, can you go over again why we think widening the bridge is not a good alternative? You know, how much would it cost? How long would it take to work with Caltrans, you know, and so forth? You've kind of said that that's sort of in a, you know, the option 3 is just not feasible, is what you said. Can you better explain why is it not feasible?
Yes. So the widening the bridge, because the clearance issue, we likely will end up have to reconstruct the bridge. And that is a project. It's not a when issue. It's not even a how much issue. It's a if question. And it's a big if. And this particular project is not in our general plan or the regional transmission plan. So there's no funding, there's no schedule. Basically, that's what we mean by there's a lot of uncertainties. And even if it happens, it's likely have a greater impact, because in order to build a bridge to meet today's clearance standard, it has to be higher and approach will be longer. The impact will only be greater than a bicycle and pedestrian bridge. On top of that, Caltrans will have a lot of control and or influence in the design as well as decision making. As opposed to the bike path overcrossing we're looking at now, the town has a lot of control over how it look like, but of course we're also responsible for funding the money.
And could you also, one more question, that if it's okay with the mayor, why did we not have any north side options?
This one, there's two main reasons, and I'm going to start out and I'm going to ask Jackie to help out with the second one. So the two main reasons is, one is how our users are using the facility today. And the second one is more engineering and right-of-way issues. For the first one, because where Fisher Middle School is located, so to the south of Blossom Hill, and our own pedestrian count shows on the pedestrian volume on the south side versus the north side is a 2-to-1 ratio. So this is how people travel today, and we really want to respect that and really meet people's needs. If we put the overcrossing on the north side, people, the Fisher Middle School students will have to cross the street, and will be really difficult for the eastbound cyclists to navigate that bridge. And Jackie, if you're ready, I would like you to fill in about the more engineering concerns.
Hi, Ying. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you again for the opportunity for speaking. My name is Joggy Madal. I'm with BKF Engineers, the civil engineering consultant assisting the town with this project. We did evaluate a northerly crossing pretty extensively throughout this feasibility study. And, you know, to add to what Ying mentioned, some of the issues just were related to the overall circulation and analysis of the patterns that we saw out there when counts were completed pre-COVID. The majority of the counts seen, identified a 2-to-1 ratio with the amount of traffic, pedestrian and bicycle traffic concentrated on the south side. So the logical termini at either end, both the east and west sides, was at the south side, where one can connect to Los Gatos Creek Trail on the west, and then also Fisher Middle School on the east. Introducing a northerly path would raise several safety concerns, in addition to not following the current line of travel that's happening on the south side there. Those safety concerns are introducing additional conflict points between pedestrians and bicyclists, with vehicles at both the West Roberts Road intersection as well as the East Roberts Road intersection. In addition to that, there were several right-of-way impacts that will be incurred along the north side there. The town does not have existing right-of-way beyond the existing back of sidewalk along that stretch there. So in order to get a northerly pathway installed, you would need to acquire right-of-way from Vasona Park on the west, in addition to right-of-way from private residences located on the east side there, all the way up to East Roberts Road. In addition to those two main impacts, there are several utility impacts as well. Due to those three main options and the considerable amount of right-of-way available on the south side, that essentially was the logical place to put this alternative 2 footprint at this early stage in the conceptual planning process.
And if I could ask one more question related to, I keep adding one more, sorry, Mayor. Related to option 1, I think you discarded option 1 because on the west side of 17, there was a lot of disruption with the neighbors. And I'm wondering, will the Ohlone Court residents prefer option 1? But the drawing looks like it actually comes through Ohlone Court and probably would be even more undesirable. Can you speak to that? You or Ying?
Sure. Ying, I'll start off and feel free to jump in on anything I may have missed. You're correct. When we first started with the alternative 1 analysis, there were several different alignments studied. Many of them did not directly run through the Ohlone Court community there, but alongside and adjacent to it. So when the several alternatives that we developed were introduced in our original community meeting in February earlier this year, we received input from the community at that time, and due to the strong opposition, that was one of the main reasons why we eliminated that option from further consideration. In fact, there was, when comparing the different alternatives together, we had asked each of the community members attending at that time to place a sticker next to their preferred alternative or alignment at that very early stage in the process. And it was, an overwhelming response to alternative 2. So, at the conclusion of that meeting, it was very clear that the direction going forward should not have been with alternative 1 at that time. We kind of pivoted amongst many other issues, noted in our feasibility analysis to concentrate on alternative 2 going forward. And the main goal now is to concentrate on how we can continue to incorporate community input going forward and work very closely with the Ohlone Court community in providing an alternative that would be suitable along the south side there.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, sounds like your question got answered. Ms. Sayak, I saw your hand up first, then Vice Mayor.
Thank you. I do want to follow up on what Mr. Bondal said about community input. So our understanding is that with the feasibility study, we'd move towards final design. I mean, that there's still many months of work that still needs to go in, particularly with the environmental clearance. Is there a communication plan already built in so that for those neighbors in Ohlone Court, they understand upfront what touch points the town will have with the neighborhood as this progresses and the design finalizes?
Yes, this is Ying Smith. Thank you for that question. And our community engagement strategy, we're following the Connect Los Gatos plan. And it's a very comprehensive approach that we have many tools in our toolbox, and the council reviewed and approved it back in March. And granted, we always see room for improvements, and we think getting really direct communication with the community, with especially the neighbors on Ohlone Court and also on the other end of the bridge, that's so crucial. We definitely want to talk to them. So we, in what we have done is a direct mailing, project website, and also the A-frames, the posters along the Crook Trail and on Blossom Hill Road and near Fisher, because many people out walking and biking, we think that gets us a lot of attention. And definitely we see the room for improvements. Obviously there's some hiccups in the mailing, and we'll continue to work on those.
Okay, and if I may, Madam Mayor, a second question for
Yes, go ahead.
So with this recommendation, there's a request for some flexibility on the actual design, and there's 3 proposals for the actual bridge design. When those 3 are developed more, those will also be shared with the community. Is that correct?
Yes, definitely. And part of it is not only want to do a bit more design work, we also want to get the community's input on the look and feel of the bridge.
Okay, and so the invitation that was asked of looking down on it, there will be some visuals that can help us further visualize what this would look like adjacent for the neighbors.
Yes, that's a very good suggestion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Spector, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Somewhat the same kind of questions, but a little bit different. One of the things that we're being asked to decide tonight, or we decide to do, is to proceed with a final design. If we are proceeding with a final design, then how can the residents of Ohlone Court weigh in on this final design? I mean, isn't it like it's going to be there, and what can Ohlone Court do about it?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I will start. I'm going to ask Jackie to help me finish. So when we say final design, it's actually going to be a 3-year process. We first start from the preliminary engineering and then environmental clearance. So it's that get us to the 35% design. And that's a key milestone. And then after the 65. So it's not like we start and then we finish. It's going to take some time. And Jackie, I hope you can also fill in how that process may look like.
Yeah, absolutely, Ying. One thing I'd like to clarify is the term final design is being thrown around, but prior to final design happening will be a pretty significant preliminary engineering effort in the next stage. Throughout that preliminary engineering design effort, the goal is to engage the community to clarify, some of the questions related to what the design details will look like along that westerly segment, where the benefit zone is located. And following the preliminary design effort will be an extensive environmental clearance process, where the community will have, a lot of opportunities for input on any further design details that are not worked out already during that preliminary design phase.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, I actually have some hopefully basic overall questions. The first question is, how many opportunities were there to be heard on this? I know that the Complete Streets Commission heard this, made a recommendation. I know that there were 2 community outreach meetings. What other opportunities were there along the way for people to be heard on this? And I don't know who answers that, Ms. Betty, Ms. Smith. But if this went through the Complete Streets Committee, I know that there were public hearings. So I'm trying to figure out where were the opportunities and over what period of time?
Yes, we actually document this really well. All Complete Streets and Transportation Commission meetings are public, and they are now available on Zoom, which makes hopefully a bit easier for people to participate. And we have the project website with the project manager's name and contact information, based my name right there. People are welcome to reach out to me, and some of them do. And we really want to use the social media because that's another place that people share with us. They say they don't have time, but they are willing to look at a quick post on Nextdoor or Facebook. And we do that. And our website is a really good resource. We put the project video there. We put all the documents there. And of course, the community meetings, the first one was done at the council chamber back in February. The one last week was done on Zoom. At both meetings, the first one will have more than 20 people show up, and the August meeting will have 40, which was very good, we think, for a small community. So there are many, yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you, but I think you answered my question.
Okay.
My next kind of overall question is, as I read this report and as I try to understand this, what the council is being asked to do is say, council, do you agree that there should be a bicycle and pedestrian overcrossing? Here are some spots we looked at. We've identified this alternative as the most cost-effective and providing the most public harm with the least private cost, or public good at the least private harm in this location. And that since this is a lengthy process, what we're trying to do is get off the ground and say, yes, we think this is okay. Yes, go forth and determine what type of bridge it should be, where exactly it should be, pursue grants, because we think this is generally a good idea. And all along the way, there is going to be environmental clearance, more hearings, more design, all of which will be presented to whoever is interested in the community at that point to weigh in on. This is not a final decision to construct a particular bridge at a particular place at this time. Am I correct about that? Whoever?
Yes, you are correct, and very good summary.
Okay, that's what I wanted to understand. Any other questions for staff from council? And I see your hands up. I explained the process at the start, that there's 3 minutes for public comment. And each of you with your hands up have already had your 3 minutes of comment. Then I closed the hearing and we've gone on to council discussion at this point. So I won't be calling on you again. So council, at this point, I'm looking to the council for a discussion and or a motion. Okay, seeing none, it's getting late. So I will make a motion. My motion is that we approve the feasibility study, and I emphasize feasibility study, for a project that may or may not occur in 2025 for the Highway 17 bicycle and pedestrian overcrossing, that we proceed with, although it says final design, my summary that was confirmed, I understand this to be proceed with exploring design options for a final bridge to be constructed on Blossom Hill, which is alternative 2. Authorize staff to analyze those different types, solicit more community input, which is what I understood was the request for the final actual design phase, which means what it looks like, where it goes, how high it is, and authorize the town managers to submit a grant to Caltrans so that we can perhaps get funding, perhaps not, and that we commit in the future in 23 and 24 to match funding if we in fact receive the grant. And I'm making the motion because as a community, we have worked long and hard to make improvements to our bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. We want to be a green community. We want kids to get to school safely. We want pedestrians to use alternative transportation. This is a good way to be able to do this. And it's a very, very preliminary step in the hopes of completing a project that can achieve those goals. So that's why I make the motion to adopt the recommendation in the staff report. Is there a second? Mr. Rennie.
Yeah, I will second it. I agree with the things that you've said. I'm confident that we've explored all the other reasonable options. It seems like perhaps we didn't get quite enough input from the Ohlone Court neighborhood, but looking at the other possible options, it really takes us down to this. I know they'd like us to widen the bridge instead. I know, from being on VTA board that it's going to be the first of never when Caltrans gets around to building that bridge. We've tried to get funds just to improve 17, and that it's not going to be easy to get funds for that bridge or to get Caltrans to move in that direction. When Ying described that it's likely that they would raise Blossom Hill Road in order to get the bridge higher up, I suspect that's going to be even worse for the Ohlone neighborhood, because now we've raised all the car traffic up 6 feet or so. And my guess is it's going to be more gradual than actually the bridge will be. I'm more confident that this could work out. The design is still coming, but I'm more confident it could work out with minimal impact on the neighborhood because we can keep the bridge low and we have a hill and screening. I'm very happy to hear that there's a lot more opportunity for the neighborhood to help in the design process of this bridge. So I'm going to go ahead and second the motion.
Okay, there's a motion and a second on the floor. Any discussion on the motion before I call the question? Okay, I'm going to start with Mr. Rennie.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Spector.
Yes.
Councilwoman Sayok.
Yes.
And the mayor votes yes, it passes unanimously. And that completes our agenda for this evening. Thank you very much, everyone. And we will see you on hopefully September 8th for our community conversation on police. And if not, then on September 15th for our next council meeting. So thank you, everyone, and good night.